Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Game of Thrones. I'm flying a dragon on your face, how do you respond? Chapter 61. Your Highness, there is no need to go altogether, and at this time. Sir Tredemont has often been confused since he followed Jaehaerys. He dared to swear that if the latter was not a prince but a smuggler, no one would be better than him. His thinking was like a wild imagination, and no one could understand it. Moreover, this kind of thing was originally commonplace for an old man who had been drifting on the sea for half his life. It was part of the daily affairs of the fleet. Why did His Royal Highness solemnly announce it? It is completely unnecessary to bring all the ships. No, or it is superfluous. The royal fleet used to have strict ship maintenance regulations. Although it has been somewhat abandoned in recent years, the regulations of anchoring at the mouth of the Danshui River for at least 1 month every year have always been strictly followed. After all, the most feared thing at sea is that the bottom of the ship is rotten. The strong water pressure will quickly crush the bottom of the entire ship in an instant. There is no way to discharge the sudden influx of seawater in time with wooden barrels and a few pitiful pumps. In the end, the only way is to abandon the ship and escape. And not all of them are anchored, which would create a vacuum period of defense. If foreign enemies invade at this time, the 3 islands in Blackwater Bay can only rely on the castle for passive defense. Sir, this is the highest order from the kingdom, and it must be executed. Jaehaerys looked serious. Your Highness, as the commander-in-chief of the royal fleet, I obey the arrangements of the kingdom, but I also have the right to a reasonable explanation. Well, I didn't intend to reveal it. Since you insist, I can only tell the truth. What, isn't this too ridiculous? Sir Tredemont was instantly emo after listening to Jaehaerys' explanation. An unprecedented storm will sweep across Dragonstone. Destroy all the ships of the royal fleet. Are you kidding? The royal fleet is anchored at the dock in the sheltered bay, and the dock has been renovated. What kind of storm can wipe out the entire fleet? He has only heard of such a storm from myths. It is rumored that Storm's End was finally built in the repeated confrontations with the god of storms. And how did the prince know? As if seeing Sir Tredemont's doubts, Jaehaerys had to bring out his argument that he could dream of a dragon. One trick can do anything, no matter if it's old-fashioned or not, as long as it works. I believe this should be the revelation given to me by the dragon god. Before the fall of King's Landing, I also dreamed that King's Landing was engulfed by the golden waves, and my father's death. Dragon god, is this the god of ancient Valyria? Sir Tredemont pondered. Jaehaerys would not tell him that this so-called dragon god is the name of the god he will use in the future. He can avoid the road of incense, but he didn't say that he can't create a god. Through creating gods, understand the way of gods in this world, and then verify it with your own way. Of course, when it comes to creating gods, the flower-growing family has fallen behind in the new century. Before he crossed over, he had heard that there was a sect in the Monkey Kingdom where all gods lived in harmony. Hugo, Shakespeare, Li Shixian and Sun Dapao were all moved to the altar. Absolutely funny with a bit of solemnity, spanning the East and the West, running through the past and the present, all things return to one, it's outrageous. Wearing a vest for a while is fun. Wearing a vest all the time is fun. Those who are interested can search for Yuan and Gaodai sect on Baidu. After reading it, you will instantly feel that what the old Taoist said is true. I don't know either. In my dream, there was a dragon flying in the sky. A majestic voice told me what I must do, otherwise I would face a catastrophe. From the fall of King's Landing to the death of my father, it's like this. Jaehaerys said seriously. He also described the dragon to Sir Tredemont, but here he did not describe it according to the appearance of the dragon in Westeros. Instead, he described it based on the appearance of the dragon in the past of Westeros, but the image of the dragon of the flower growers with auspicious clouds under his feet, a bull head, wolf mane, antlers, eagle claws, a snake body, dragon scales, and a fish tail, and a dragon ball surrounded by flames from his mouth. Wow, this breath contains several major noble emblems in Westeros. Dragon, deer, wolf, osprey, and the sun image variant of the Martell family. Jaehaerys didn't react at first, but as he was talking, he suddenly said that he was a little confused too. I'm not kidding, but the flower-growing dragon really looks like this. Sir Tredemont grinned. You don't believe it, right? Jaehaerys said it seriously. and he sketched on the parchment while talking, but his painting skills were terrible _me. You believe it, right? I always feel that this so-called dragon god is a stitched monster, taking parts of the emblems of various families and stitching them together to form a new image. Okay, as long as His Royal Highness is happy. The two of them talked to each other about the next march and the defense of Dragonstone on the sea, and studied it. At the same time, the fishing company stopped all offshore fishing activities, and 10 fishing boats were put on the battlefield again, hanging the 3-headed dragon flag, and rearranged personnel to install weapons such as scorpion crossbows. That is to say, Dragonstone is now fully staffed, otherwise it would be difficult to complete the reinstallation in a short time. Of course, the actual combat effectiveness has certainly declined, but there is nothing that can be done about it. The Dragonstone fleet can go out, but we cannot let people know how long the window period is. Otherwise, as a certain Blue Star Sea King said, every beauty has a window period, it depends on whether you can seize the opportunity. For these fishing boats, there is also a saying, the old horse is still unfulfilled, and the bridle is tied and the saddle is tied. Without waiting for the whip to whip the hoof, it will jump to take the enemy's head. Set off as soon as possible, and after reaching the Crab Claw Peninsula, try to stay close to the coastline and head towards the river mouth. This storm is so big that it will destroy the world. In fact, Jaehaerys didn't know how big the storm was when Daenerys was born, but the warning from the treasure tree made him dare not take it lightly. In the case that this immortal boss might take action, no matter how cautious you are, it is not too much. After arranging the fleet, Jaehaerys called William Darry, the commander-in-chief of the Dragonstone garrison, and Pipers Whitley, the leader of the inner guard, to focus on checking the blind spots of Dragonstone's defense, especially various tunnels, passes, city gates, etc., and prepare rolling logs, stones, hot oil and gold soup. At the same time, the equipment of the mint and seafood processing plant was packed together. The defense on land is the last and most helpless layer. Fortunately, the castle of Dragonstone is steep, and after 9 months of repairs, reserves, soldiers' replenishment and training, it is now well equipped. If the news of the former main fleet's rest is leaked and the fishing boat's tactical fraud fails, the enemy attacking Dragonstone will also be beaten to a pulp under the castle. What are you worried about now? Supernatural power. The immortal boss personally took action and directly broke the defense system of Dragonstone. No, if that happens, I can't resist it left and right, what else is there to worry about? Jaehaerys was relieved instantly. There was a row of green Dao fruits in front of Jaehaerys, exactly 10 of them. Since I have been working multiple jobs, I no longer have time to open blind boxes. Now that his flower of God has been completed and his flower of Chi is about to be completed, he finally doesn't have to chew on it after opening the blind box. Not to mention himself, everyone feels too low even when they look at it. So after a friendly and harmonious communication with Duobao, I finally learned how to open the box outside the body. There is no waste of spiritual energy, it feels very silky. There is a chance that something good will come out if you draw 10 consecutive draws. These are Duobao Shanjan's original words, but they sound a bit like the tone of a lottery salesman. I don't know if it was Jaehaerys' delusion. There is no turning back when the bow is drawn. As a professional ruthless person who played with fire at the age of 7 and slashed people at the age of 8, Jaehaerys was even more ruthless to himself. Then, come on. Thank you for your patronage, thank you for your patronage, thank you for your patronage, flying arrows to penetrate lice, thank you for your patronage, Overlord spear skill, thank you for your patronage, thank you for your patronage. Clang, clang, clang. Congratulations on obtaining the magical power of sitting on fire. Of course, these sound effects are all dubbings added by Jaehaerys himself in his mind, for no other reason than to add a sense of atmosphere and ritual. Well, if you don't pay attention to a sense of ritual in your life, and you can't bear to update it even on holidays, you deserve to write a book and no one will read it. Not bad. 10 fruits can be used to create 2 skills and a magical power that I don't know what. As for the skills, at first glance, they are the kind of mortal skills similar to the swordsmanship of the Monkey King. I will pay more attention to it later. And this is the first time in a long time that magical powers have appeared. He closed his eyes and experienced it carefully. After a moment, he opened his eyes, and a light flashed in his eyes. The magical power is indeed powerful, and sitting on fire is one of the 72 Taoist earth evil techniques. Use the hand kneading technique to avoid fire, so that all fires will not come to you. Plant a golden lotus in the fire and become a god after the work is completed. Yeah, with the fire sitting technique, my mother no longer has to worry about me playing with fire. Is this considered as mentioning the title of Unburnt One? Very powerful. It's so. I can't stand it anymore. Is this one of the 72 Taoist techniques of earth evil? You might as well give me a water drinking spell. Drink up the river in one breath, then spit it out and flood the 7 armies. At that time, it can also be said that it is the reincarnation of Calabash Baby and Water Baby. There is no use in sitting on fire. Well, let me tell you, at least all kinds of fire can't hurt you, right? Duo Bao Miaoshu said sarcastically. What I lack now is this useless magical power. When I am thrown into the fire by my enemies, how can I scare them to death by not burning my hand? Don't underestimate magical powers, okay? If you practice sitting on fire to the extreme, you will be invulnerable to all fires even if your spiritual energy is exhausted and you don't pinch the spell. What a great comment. Are you trying to say that I don't even need to be cremated after my death? Jaehaerys was not fooled at all. What the hell is this? No, you must give me an explanation today, otherwise you will never stay in my body again. Let's break up. Degree_degree. Duo Bao Miaoshu's family knows their own affairs, and the fairy world blind box has never disappointed anyone. Okay, I'll give you another yellow Taoist fruit as compensation, okay. In fact, these fruits are not valuable, but no matter how heavy the rain is, it will not moisten the grass without roots, and the Tao and the Dharma will not save those who have no destiny. Of course, this is not absolute, especially for a certain tree that relies on others and is perfect. As Jaehaerys changed the plot more and more, Duo Bao Miaoshu clearly felt that several divine thoughts were slowly beginning to pay attention to Dragonstone. This has entered the field of vision of chess players in this world. At this time, the landlord is still too immature. After all, there are many ways to eliminate it without being a human being. Even the tenant himself is living in fear. After escaping from the fairy world, it can be regarded as starting over the path of cultivation. The cultivation of spiritual roots and other plants is originally longer than that of humans, but now it itself is weaker than Jaehaerys. This storm may be a test, or it may be a means of obliteration. Whether it's a test or an obliteration, it all depends on the ability Jaehaerys shows this time. Just like when you see a wild bee hive in your own vegetable garden, some people will choose to smoke out the wild bees inside and destroy it completely, while others will choose to keep it until it produces honey before harvesting it. Anyone who wants to use their brains to evolve into a killer bee must consider whether the honey is worth it. To put it bluntly, it all depends on gains and losses. Even the immortal bosses have to weigh whether it is in their own interests to spend a lot of money to forcefully erase a human immortal. Although the landlord is not yet a human being, the practitioners in this world are too biased and their overall strength will definitely not be comparable to that of Jaehaerys. However, in some aspects, Jaehaerys is not inferior at all. Okay, should I take a shower and wash my hands first? Jaehaerys asked, would this be better? This, Duo Bao Miaoshu was speechless. He had never heard of it. After all, those who opened blind boxes in the past were all immortals at the lowest level. Their immortal bodies are pure and untainted, so there is no need to clean their hands. How about giving it a try? It suggested. Just give it a try. Jaehaerys ordered people to fetch water, bathe and change clothes. He rushed to the Flying Dragon Tower and set up an altar for worship. There were no prayers, but he kept saying words such as, Sanqing bless you. The Taoist ancestor appears. Feeling that it was almost done, he put the yellow Tao fruit between his hands and shouted solemnly, Swastika. A golden light burst out from his palm, and even in the daytime, it illuminated the top of the Flying Dragon Tower with golden splendor, almost blinding Jaehaerys' titanium dog eyes. Swordsmanship of the 72 earthly evil techniques. Jaehaerys shouted. This swordsmanship is different from the mortal skills such as swordsmanship of the Ape King. It is a serious sword controlling technique, combining chi and sword, controlling the sword with chi, and controlling the sword with the spirit. Jaehaerys' spiritual energy is insufficient, but the power of the Yuenshin has just reached the threshold of controlling the sword with the spirit. In a blink of an eye, the Duobao Miaoshu reacted. This is unreasonable. Is the effect of bathing and washing hands so powerful? This spell is not the most practical among the 72 spells, but its attack power is definitely ranked in the top 3. For those below the earthly immortals, it is directly invincible. Okay. Could it be that the heavenly immortals in the past could not get good things because they had no hands to clean? The Duobao Miaoshu seemed to have found the answer. If there is a chance to return to the fairyland, it will definitely say to those gods, "Hi, it turns out that it's not me who's pitted, but you guys who are not sincere. Look for the reasons from yourself. Have you kept your original intention after so many years of becoming an immortal?" This is more powerful and more lethal than the so-called probability. If Jaehaerys had a personal attribute panel, he would definitely be an assassin-type hero with high attack and fragile body. Duobao Miaoshu thought about it, and the most important thing at the moment is to save his life. Forget it. I, Duobao, have been hiding for more than 50 chapters, and I have no chance to show off. Today, I will open your eyes. Daoyu, I will give you a life-saving item. You must sacrifice it with your heart. A ray of light flashed, and Jaehaerys put on a piece of armor directly, shining and shining. It's extraordinary at first glance. I saw that the armor was made of layers of black and gold scales. On top of the helmet was a roaring dragon head. 2 black forked horns tilted back and finally entangled at the back of the head. 2 huge fangs were turned out just right. Protecting the temples, the pull-down visor looks like a thick beard. The winding dragon body extends from the back of the head to the neck, and then twists downward to protect the spine. The 2 dragon arms are separated to the left and right, forming shoulder armor, arm armor, and the hands are shaped like sharp dragon claws. On the torso, the armor continues to expand outward along the dragon's body, forming skirt armor, crotch guards, shin guards and other parts of the armor. Normally, this precious armor can be gathered in the Dantian and nourished by one's own spiritual energy. When used, a thought can quickly appear on the surface of the body, forming a tight protection. This armor is called Dongfang Qinglong Department Armor, and it is sent along with the treasure armor, which is the sacrificial refining method. There are 99 and 81 prohibitions inside the treasure armor. After being completely refined, it can block the attacks of immortals. Of course, Jaehaerys' current cultivation level is low, and there is definitely no hope in refining 81. But fortunately, this armor master fully demonstrated his divine care and divided the 81 prohibitions into several stages. Among them, 1 to 9 prohibitions, even for foundation building, can also perform sacrifices smoothly. Relying on the defensive power of Baojia itself, human immortals will definitely not be able to break through the defense. After Jaehaerys completed the sacrifice, he tried to form a seal and shouted, "Protect." In the dreamy light, the armor quickly emerged, and a majestic dragon appeared in the mirror, wrapping itself tightly to protect it. If this cultivation level is in place, after Jaehaerys has completely refined the 81 restraints, he can really say in front of the immortal boss, "I beg to die." Whenever he speaks softer, he is like a coward. 2 days later, when the Dragonstone fleet's horn sounded, Jaehaerys knew that this was the agreed day to leave. Dragonstone Castle quickly closed its gates, everything went according to the planned plan, and 10 fishing boats also began to patrol the surrounding waters. The old ones took on heavy responsibilities that they should not bear at their age. Of course, Jaehaerys would not let them die. They could make every effort to rush to Dragonstone or other places before discovering the storm coming from far away. As long as they could come back later, all the crew and every soldier can receive a generous reward. Jaehaerys has not practiced recently. The war between man and nature is about to break out. He must always pay attention to Layla's birth situation. Soon, at a certain moment, Queen Layla suddenly suffered from unbearable abdominal pain. Having given birth many times, she immediately knew that the little life in her belly was about to be born. All the bachelors, midwives, and midwives on Dragonstone have already been gathered into the fortress by Jaehaerys. They are all professionals with very rich experience in delivering babies. Viserys and Rhaenys prayed for their mother and grandmother in the sept, hoping for the mother's blessing, while Jaehaerys waited anxiously outside the delivery room. Watching the midwives coming in and out, bringing boiled water, bandages, plant ashes and other items into the delivery room one after another, his heart inevitably became agitated. The wind outside became stronger and stronger, and a huge roar began to echo in the stone drum tower. The sound was like the sound of rumbling war drums, filling the entire fortress for a while. And in the distance, a huge storm is slowly taking shape. The black storm has formed a scene that blocks out the sky and the sun. If someone flies thousands of miles high in the sky, he can see a huge eye of the storm being born in the narrow sea. Like gods opening their eyes and glaring at the world, violent winds mixed with angry lightning, silver electric snakes accompanied by pouring rain painted an apocalyptic scene in the air. The strong wind whipped up tens of thousands of tons of seawater, forming white walls of water that rushed towards Dragonstone Island and hit the docks, fortresses and reefs made of stone walls. In an instant, broken jade rose into the air like thousands of piles of white snow. At this moment, the king is here. Varys thought of the intelligence from the past few days. Your Majesty, after receiving news from Earl Redwine, most of the Dragonstone fleet has headed to the mouth of the Trident at this time. It should be to remove shipworms, barnacles and other things from the bottom of the ship. There are only a few old ships on patrol now. He asked for instructions whether to take this opportunity to send the Qingding Island fleet to besiege Dragonstone Island. Robert was overjoyed immediately. Just as he was about to go to bed, the enemy brought him a pillow himself. So what are you waiting for? Waiting for Wildfire. What the hell? Has Harlem not solved the problem after all this time? What's the use of him? Oh, several warlocks from the Alchemist Guild have died in the process of improvement. It seems that Harlem is not a person who does nothing. Forget it, let's not hold him accountable. Anyway, now that Dragonstone has cut off an arm, it doesn't really matter whether Wildfire assists or not. Robert happily ordered Lord Redwyn to lead the Arbor fleet straight to Dragonstone. What? The old guy Redwyn said that he could only send half of the battleships, and the remaining half would have to defend the Ironborn on the Arbor. Okay, there is not much difference between 200 warships and 100 warships now. Varys felt a little strange. According to his Little Bird report, the power of Dragonstone was now in the hands of Prince Jaehaerys. According to this prince's methods, he should not have made such an obvious mistake. There must be some dirty trick waiting for the Iron Throne. So he carefully suggested to Robert, but His Majesty the King, who was obviously dazzled by the easy victory, would not listen to the advice of an old and ugly eunuch. He is not, Mad King, Aerys. If Varys wasn't really useful, he would have chopped off the eunuch's head to appease the grievances of the nobles in King's Landing. Wallace was in trouble and could only return angrily, but he was still confused and could only let the little birds pay more attention to the happenings on the island. Queen Layla's screams in the delivery room became louder and louder. Jaehaerys quietly used his spiritual sense to probe in. The scene inside was similar to what he imagined. Layla's condition at this time was definitely not a difficult delivery, but the elderly mother was temporarily "I can't keep up with my strength." So he secretly sent a trace of spiritual energy to Queen Layla, which refreshed her and felt a new power emerging from her body. Wow wow wow, the baby cried, and everyone was excited about it. Queen Layla felt relieved and fainted, but fortunately Jaehaerys' aura protected her heart. As long as the midwives and bachelors inside were not fools, they would naturally know how to take care of her. Not only did the wind outside not stop, but it seemed to be infuriated. The thunder became more intense, and streaks of lightning struck directly at the towers of the fortress. After a while, Jaehaerys saw thick smoke rising from the Sea Dragon Tower. Apparently, it was hit. Jaehaerys looked at the newborn dragon mother, and a feeling of emotion came to his heart. It was really hard for such a little thing to become the mother of 3 giant dragons in the original plot, and to fight against such ferocious beasts as the Night King. Got it. But in this life, you're lucky, you don't have to suffer so much. But isn't that guy outside a bit too much? Isn't it just giving birth to a child? Why is there a storm and thunder and lightning? The wind outside must have exceeded level 15. Under such a huge wind speed, Jaehaerys couldn't imagine how the simple houses of the fishermen and farmers at the foot of Longshan would withstand it. On Blue Star, he had personally experienced many super typhoons. The camphor tree as thick as a bowl was uprooted, and the sycamore tree that one person hugged also fell down. Although he had already notified the villagers to go to Longshan to avoid the disaster, there were always some elderly people who were unwilling to leave their homes. Standing in front of the window, he saw with his own eyes that countless thatched houses and cabins were torn apart by the strong wind, and wooden boards, straw and some human-shaped black dots were swept into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After this storm, I have to spend a lot of manpower and material resources to provide disaster relief and rebuild houses. In the thick clouds, waves of spiritual power emerged. The strength was not great. It looked like the strength of the foundation building period, but for some reason it could stir up such a great power of heaven and earth. You said that if you were a terrestrial immortal or a heavenly immortal, I couldn't beat you and could only hide. But when did a mere foundation building period dare to act so recklessly? If a tiger doesn't show its power, do you think I'm Hello Kitty? He took out a double-arc dragon bone giant bow from the arsenal, hung the bowstring, and stretched out his hand to pull the bow full without paying attention to the common sense of not shooting without arrows. Well, the power is really good. With a few arrows, he went straight to the top of the flying dragon tower. The wind, rain, thunder and lightning here were more intensive, and as if sensing the provocation of the mortals below, the thunder and lightning began to gather here like they were free. Disciple Hygeia, respectfully invite the gods of the thunder department. Jaehaerys had set up the altar at some point. The altar was covered with yellow cloth, and rituals such as burning incense, opening the altar, asking for water, raising banners, and announcing the list had already been prepared. On the altar, the tablet of the nine heavens thunder god Ying Yuan Pu Hua Tian Zun was in the center, surrounded by the thunder department Dang Mo Zhenjin, the left and right generals, Peng Lu Go Bai, Ma Zhao Wen Guan, Dang Xin Zhang Dao and other thunder department gods, with 3 animals and 4 fruits, incense, candles and ingots, and everything else. He was seen stepping on the U-step and the gang do, holding a peach wood sword in his hand, wearing a double-breasted robe, which was as long as his calf, without sleeves, and the sleeves were long and carried with him. On it were embroidered Yu Luo Shoutai, the sun, the moon, the stars, the 8 trigrams, the pagoda, the dragon, the phoenix, and the crane with gold and silver threads. He moved like the wind, and in his every move, he was really a young Taoist priest with an air of fairy spirit. The reason why magic is called magic is that it can communicate with the spirits of heaven and earth. Even if the thunder department gods are not worshipped in the world of Song of Ice and Fire, the gods given by the laws of the heavens can still guide their divine power to descend. For a time, the ears of all living beings in the world of ice and fire rang with thunder that seemed to be there and not there. The thunder of the sky, I command it. Kill the demons and eliminate evil, clear the sky. Hurry up and obey the command. Jaehaerys threw a talisman into the air, which ignited without wind. The fire flashed and rushed to an unknown place. In an instant, a thunder as thick as a bucket came from the sky. It hit the eye of the storm. The dark clouds in the eye of the storm were instantly dispersed. How sharp is Jaehaerys' eyes! From a distance, I saw 2 unknown things fluttering in the sky, one with a bird's head and a human body, and the other with a human head and a bird's body. As they circled and mated with each other, a stream of wind and clouds was gathered. But after the thunder of the sky, they could no longer become a force to be reckoned with. They circled for a long time but could not gather clouds and thunder. What kind of evil demon is this? In broad daylight, in the open world, undressed, doing such a dirty thing. Take 2 of my arrows. Jaehaerys was furious, and his evil courage was born. Plus the 2 objects in the sky, they really look a bit like the little monsters in the legend that have not yet fully transformed, so how can he be afraid? So he jumped up from the window, turned over and came to the dome on the tower. The armor in the Dantian automatically covered his body, wrapped him up, like a human-shaped dragon, and the residual power of thunder and lightning still wandered between the armor pieces. Hey, the blood on the tip of the tongue is the blood of the heart, and I will kill evil and exorcise demons without mercy. Kill evil. He bit his tongue with pain, and a mouthful of bloody saliva sprayed on the arrow, emitting bursts of blood light like flames. He drew his bow and shot arrows, 2 arrows in a row, like a meteor chasing the moon, with lightning and blood light. He went straight to the monster in the sky. The momentum was amazing. The 2 monsters were only at the foundation building level, and they only had the ability to drive wind, rain, thunder and lightning, so they dared not directly touch their tassels, and hurriedly dodged. Arrows are still arrows after all, not missiles, and they don't have the tracking function. The 2 monsters looked at each other, rolled up a cloud of air and left in a hurry. Humph, I can tell at a glance that you are not human. If possible, Jaehaerys would also like to shout a mighty dragon. But let alone a dragon, he doesn't even have a dragon scale. Besides, if it weren't for this armor, he would die in a minute. Mainly because he presided over the Wanglu Dajao and the 2 arrows just now almost consumed all his energy, and now he is relying on the armor to hold on. If those 2 monsters dare to look back, they will get a big gift package of heads. Oh, my god, my Wanglu Dajao is still waiting to send off the gods and immortals. He stood up tremblingly and looked down. It's so high. Why did I get up when my head was hot? Maybe the atmosphere is right, and you want to show me a duck on the shelf. Duobao Miaoshu said slowly. I told you to keep a low profile, but you turned around and made a big fuss. You almost exposed me to the world. Hey, bro, other people row boats with oars, but you rely on the waves. Can we take it easy? Isn't this because that demon kid is bullying people too much? Jaehaerys said angrily. Daenerys was born, and he still wanted to stir up trouble. What's wrong? Didn't he sacrifice a few lives to heaven? No, is it a sacrifice to heaven, or to themselves? Why are they asking for blood food from me? They have some godhood in this world. Duobao said faintly. Godhood is not rare to him. It is a proof of the way of heaven in a small world, just like the immortals are granted immortal scrolls. A real god. Yeah, that's not. No, is this a god? Jaehaerys was disappointed. He looked ugly, behaved eccentrically, and had no fairy spirit. It seemed that even the Lord of Light R'hllor would ask for sacrifices. They are not immortals, but gods. Duobao explained. The way of immortals is to value life and save people without limit, but the way of gods is not like that. People often put gods and immortals together, but they don't know that the way of immortals is to save others first and then save oneself. The way of gods can also put down the butcher knife and become gods on the spot even if they have committed many sins. The gods in this world are more cruel and ruthless than those in the big world. Those who are unwilling to obey will be instigated by believers to attack them, or directly use divine power to confuse their minds and lure them to seek death. Those who follow them will prosper, and those who go against them will perish. All living beings are just toys in their hands. They are like spectators in a dogfighting arena, and all living beings are like dogs. When they are happy, they throw a few bones and watch the people fighting for them. When they are unhappy, they bring down plagues and disasters, destroying families. I, Jaehaerys, am not talented, but I want to ask with a sword, why? Just because you are the gods appointed by heaven. When I was not an immortal, you were already gods. If I become an immortal, the gods can also kill me. The fearful and mighty spirit, obey my order, kill the evil and leave the good, kill without mercy. This is my way. The gods have no way, and I am the dusk of the gods. All living beings have no way, and I am the world-destroying blade. Crazy. If you don't hate God and man, I don't see you. If you hate God and man, I don't see you. Crazy, crazy. Duobao Miaoshu muttered to himself. This kid is suffering from Neux syndrome again. How many dishes are there, and he drinks like this? Jaehaerys finally regained his composure, climbed down from the tower, and climbed in through the window. After holding on to complete the process of sending off the saints and lowering the flags, he could no longer hold on. The protective armor automatically disintegrated and turned into a mini armor floating in the Chi Si Dantian. Sneeze, sneeze. When he woke up again, it was already the next day. The dragon tower was getting cold at night, and Jaehaerys was sleeping on the ground again, feeling a little cold. Originally, after the foundation was established, such minor illnesses and disasters would not be able to enter his body, but unfortunately he used too much force yesterday and his spiritual energy was exhausted. Walking in the courtyard, I heard the servants talking. Have you heard? Yesterday, the gods were supposed to punish us, but suddenly one appeared on the flying dragon tower, and drove away the gods, saving our Dragonstone Island. Hi, I have the most say on this. That is Prince Xiaoji's spiritual friend. His Highness Prince Xiaoji arranged a treat with good food and drinks a few days ago. Yes, this time Prince Xiaoji suddenly arranged for the fleet to leave, because he got the other party's oracle. Wow, what a god. Should we build a temple for him? Jaehaerys's expression changed. He summoned Long Yi to use the people's support. My incense clone's vest can now be worn. He had discussed with Duobao a long time ago that in this era of Jingfa, even this small world that still retains spiritual energy can support him to practice to the realm of earthly immortals. Although the avenue of incense has various problems and drawbacks, it is at least a path that can lead directly to immortality by using incense in the world. There is no reason to abandon it. If you want to transcend the world, cultivating yourself as a heavenly being is just the beginning. If you are afraid of being too entangled with this small world, you can also sacrifice the incense clone to let the clone bear the causal entanglement of this world, while the original body is transcendent. Strike while the iron is hot and do whatever you say. With the official endorsement of Dragonstone Island, a small temple was soon built at the pier. It was not large in scale. There was a plaque hanging outside the door, which read the Dragon Temple. It is obviously different from the Temple of the Seven Gods. There is only one statue in the temple, which is a white stone figure with a strange creature, a flower-growing dragon, wrapped around its body. It stands on a throne carved with white clouds and golden lotus. The statue is carved with a pair of scales, a sword hangs from the waist, the hair is as long as a waterfall, and the eyes of the statue are painted with purple dye. Judging from the image, he has obvious Valyrian characteristics. What's even more strange is that this statue has a lot of similarities with Jaehaerys. It feels like Jaehaerys when he has grown up. An offering table was placed in front of the statue, and a gold-plated tablet was placed in the center, with Dragon God written on it in Valyrian and the common language of Westeros. There is also a small incense burner in front of the altar. Jaehaerys has arranged for the inner guard to serve as a temporary temple blessing. He will tell people how to invite incense, burn paper, and make wishes. At the entrance of the temple, there are people selling incense, yellow paper, and ingots. Someone asked, "Who is this dragon god? What are you doing?" The temple blessing will tell people that this is the most ancient dragon god in Valyria, leading the good weather, blessings and misfortunes in the world, and protecting the country and the people. People sailing on the sea had better come to pay homage and burn incense. Incense, candles, yellow paper, etc. are all very cheap, costing less than a few copper coins in total, and you don't need to make offerings at ordinary times. If you have something to do, just pray silently in your heart, "Dragon God is merciful, bless the world," and other similar prayers. Anyway, it's better to believe that it exists than to believe that it doesn't exist. As the initiator, Jaehaerys naturally had to take the lead. He simply knelt on the futon placed under the altar table and kowtowed twice. A trace of divine consciousness has already been attached to the statue of the god through the technique of clone. If the incense clone is condensed over time, one can step into the earthly immortal realm in one fell swoop. So I am not worshipping myself, but it is also a kind of practice. Following the demonstration of Prince Jaehaerys, some people began to try to worship. The moment they knelt down, they really felt refreshed. Looking at the dragon god statue again, the originally solemn statue seemed to have become amiable and approachable. There are those ordinary people who have minor injuries and illnesses. After kowtowing and wishing for good health, they unexpectedly find that their illnesses have been cured without treatment. Miracle. A real miracle. Many people knelt before the gods and old gods, even smashing their heads or smashing them to pieces, but they didn't get any response from the gods. In contrast, the dragon god simply responded to all requests, and more people immediately joined the worship process. Jaehaerys chuckled to himself. There was no miracle, he just used his spiritual energy to heal them. Most of these people were secretly hired by the inner guards according to his instructions. However, the illness was a real illness and the injuries were real injuries. If they were fake, how could they make their performances so real? As the incense candles and yellow paper were burned, the power of the incense wrapped around the dragon god statue, continuously strengthening the part of Jaehaerys' spiritual consciousness. Although it is not very popular now, it can at least maintain daily consumption. Jaehaerys will also arrange some lucky people according to the wishes of the believers, and continue to expand the reputation of the dragon god for responding to all requests. At that time, as long as the more people worship and the more sincere they are, the power of incense will continue to flow, and they will definitely be able to create a golden body of incense. The two gods who flew away from Dragonstone are actually the descendants of the god of storms and the goddess of wind. They are the nth generation of gods with a good family. They were sent by the god of storms to Dragonstone to harvest a wave of sacrifices. Unfortunately, they didn't get many sacrifices, but they were almost shot to death by arrows. It's really a loss. If the sacrifices are not collected enough, there will be no good results after returning to the Cloud Palace. The two of them decided to wander around the surrounding waters and find a few lone fishermen to report back. At this time, a mighty fleet came from the south with sails. The two gods smiled at each other. After all, the hard-working birds get the worms. A few days later, with the return of the royal fleet, the news came that most of the Redwind fleet was destroyed by the storm. On Dragonstone, people's belief in the dragon god has reached a new level. If it weren't for the real gods, how could they have foreseen this storm and arranged for everyone on the island to avoid this disaster in advance? Even the soldiers of the royal fleet said that they saw the storm suddenly formed not far from Dragonstone. If it weren't for the dragon god's blessing, everyone would have become lunch for the sea fish at this moment, so they also joined in the worship of the dragon god. There were so many people worshipping that the incense, candles and yellow paper were once out of stock. Jaehaerys quickly arranged for the royal craftsmen to work overtime to produce them to meet the needs of the believers. It was also from this day that people's wishes began to slowly come true, and some people swore that they met the dragon god in their dreams at night. But the dragon god seemed to have a cold and kept sneezing. For this statement, many people suspected that he was riding on the popularity. After all, how could the gods catch a cold? Of course, these discussions and debates about the dragon god gradually heated up the atmosphere. People's lives these days are quite boring. What could be more exciting than witnessing the birth of a god with your own eyes? Even on Chowdo Island, Crab Island and Crab Claw Peninsula, some people began to believe and doubt, until after the establishment of dragon temples, they personally experienced the magic of the dragon god, and set off a wave of believing in the dragon god throughout the Blackwater Bay. The reputation of the Wong family and Prince Jaehaerys also became more prosperous. People and families favored by the gods are the real kings of the world. Of course, these are all later stories. In the depths of the flowing water palace in the distance, a god suddenly opened his blood-red eyes, and his blue lips moved slightly. The new god, interesting, Lillian, you go to Dragonstone in person. Since the old king has been dead for a long time, the Targaryen family on Dragonstone does not seem to have made any moves to claim the throne. Everyone has been privately rumored that the Targaryen family is ready to give up the Iron Throne. After all, they don't even have dragons. The only territory left is such a small island, and even many of the surrounding lords who once swore allegiance are now only a small part. But who would have thought that, with the name of the dragon god, the Targaryen family actually announced that they would be crowned king soon. As soon as this news came out, people were immediately encouraged. In fact, many lords and nobles don't mind pledging allegiance to the Targaryen family again, but if they don't even dare to be king, then what reason do people have to persuade themselves to be loyal to a cowardly monarch and a cowardly kingdom? Queen Layla and Jaehaerys can certainly understand. Compared to being unjustifiable, their mission in the first is to ensure that they can gain a foothold on Dragonstone. After all, if they can't even survive, how can they be crowned and take back the Iron Throne? Isn't that a foolish dream? But now the time is ripe. Dragonstone first seized the mint in White Harbor and traded gold with the pirates, successfully solving the financial crisis on the island. At this time, this kind of trade was still carried out sporadically. The main reason was that the price of pure gold in the stepstones had been hyped up to 2 gold dragons per pound, and most of the pirates' stocks had been cleared out. Dragonstone made a lot of money in this trade but then spent a lot of it. It's a bit exaggerated to say that he became the richest man in Westeros, but among the princes of the Crown, Stormlands, and Riverlands, it's probably no problem to say that he is second to none. Then he took the initiative to launch a war against Cape Wrath, crushing Robert's ambition to build a fleet to destroy Dragonstone. Finally, under the pretext of avoiding the storm, he deliberately made Dragonstone a big trap, borrowed the power of the gods, and defeated half of the Qingting Island fleet in one fell swoop. In the past 2 days, the fishing companies that have resumed their main business of fishing have salvaged many white and swollen bodies and relics of soldiers with the purple grape emblem of the Redwind family, proving that what people said is true. Now Robert can only dispatch half of the Qingting Island fleet with less than 100 warships, as well as some family fleets in the Shield Islands. There are threats to Dragonstone, but not many. In addition, Dragonstone is still constantly building new warships and improving crossbows with Spring Thunder. It can be said that the offensive and defensive situation is different now. Many noble families in the king's territory have secretly sent people to contact, and as long as Dragonstone needs them, they can immediately fight back. As for what they said, the three-headed dragon flag has been sown, and only His Majesty can raise his arm and call for people to respond, Jaehaerys said. I don't even believe a single punctuation mark of them. There is a place where people have always recognized the Targaryen family and still refuse to pay taxes to the Iron Throne. That is the Crab Claw Peninsula. The Crab Claw Peninsula is located in the northeast of the Crown. The peninsula extends into the Narrow Sea, close to Crab Bay in the north and Blackwater Bay in the south. Historically, Aegon the Conqueror sent his wife, Queen Visenya Targaryen, to the Crab Claw Peninsula to recruit them. The lords heard about King Harren's fate, so they all knelt and surrendered, and Queen Visenya accepted them as direct vassals. Since then, the Crab Claw Peninsula has been loyal to the Targaryen family. In the War of the Usurper, only the lords and knights from the Crab Claw Peninsula fought to the last moment, but in the final battle of the Trident, Rhaegar was killed and the army was demoralized, so they finally surrendered. The peninsula is barren, full of swamps and pine forests. For the Iron Throne, it is like chicken ribs, tasteless to eat and a pity to throw away, but for Dragonstone, this is the best source of soldiers and raw materials. When Dragonstone started trading with the surrounding lords, the residents of Crabclaw Peninsula were the first to respond. Now it is also the place with the closest trade with the three islands of Blackwater Bay. Most lords and residents benefited from the trade with the three islands of Blackwater Bay, and it is no longer a barren and poor place. When they were poor, they didn't know to pay taxes to the Iron Throne, but now they are rich and have a stronger back. They directly drove away the tax officials sent by the Iron Throne. They are so powerful. Seeing that the time is ripe, Jaehaerys took the lead in proposing that Queen Rhaella be crowned queen, and this proposal was unanimously agreed by all the subjects. As for why little Aegon was not crowned, first of all, Queen Rhaella, as the daughter of King Jaehaerys II, the elder of the two princes and grandsons, has an indisputable right of succession. Secondly, if others don't know, don't the members of the Targaryen family know? The Aegon on the island now is a fake, how can he be crowned? In the original plot, Queen Rhaella died after giving birth to Daenerys, and she didn't know that Aegon Targaryen was still alive, so she gave the throne to Viserys according to the order of succession. Now that Queen Rhaella has given birth to a child, she is in great health. She looks like she is in her 30s at the age of 40, and she is fully capable of taking on the responsibilities of a queen. If she doesn't inherit the throne, who will inherit it? Although outsiders did not know at this time that she had amended the succession law of the Iron Throne in the Sept of Dragonstone, and the Lannisters were not destroyed, but as Jaehaerys advised. If the name is not right, then the words will not flow. As the legitimate owner of the Iron Throne, our Targaryen family cannot leave the throne vacant for a long time, otherwise it would be equivalent to showing our cowardice in front of the world. How can a cowardly person regain the hearts of the people? It was these words that touched everyone's heart. So the coronation ceremony was soon prepared in full swing. On this day, Dragonstone released all the ravens and announced to the lords of Westeros, Queen Rhaella of the Targaryen family will be officially crowned as King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, and protector of the realm, and asked all the subjects to send people to Dragonstone to pledge their allegiance. Directly challenge Robert across the sea. But this move also put the lords in a dilemma. One is the king who is legitimate in law, and the other is the king who has occupied the Iron Throne by force but has been crowned by the High Septon. This is very difficult to deal with. Taking advantage of the news of the coronation, Jaehaerys sent people to Braavos, Pentos and the Shadowlands of Asshai. Now that the treasury of Dragonstone is full, he wants to see if he can buy some dragon eggs from outside. After all, if the dragon eggs are not hatched, they are just some precious collections. How could they have such a coincidence? Robert Baratheon was very angry. He had to be crowned king at this critical moment, not too early or too late. He had just signed a contract with Nuku Apua, the messenger of the Sea King of Braavos, to repay old debts with new debts. The principal of the old debt totaling 2 million gold dragons was also repaid with the savings in the royal treasury. But then, the Targaryen family announced their coronation. What's even more infuriating is that the contract he signed this time was the one that Apua had learned from his lessons and studied carefully, eliminating all possibilities of loopholes, and was even stamped with the private seals of both parties. In other words, whether Robert was on the Iron Throne or not, he had to repay the debt of 3 million gold dragons, 5 million gold dragons in principal and interest, 2 million principal had been repaid, and 3 million new debts were raised to repay the interest. It's just outrageous. To be honest, Robert felt that it would be better for him not to sit on the Iron Throne at this time. This was different from what he had imagined when he rebelled. He was constrained everywhere. Nothing went smoothly. Now his kingdom was facing turmoil again. Spending money was secondary, and the royal treasury still had some savings. The key was that he had no way to take Dragonstone. He couldn't understand why even the gods stood on the side of the Targaryen family. Let the Redwyne fleet on the expedition to Dragonstone be annihilated. Isn't it announcing to the world that he has been abandoned by the gods? Fortunately, after marrying the Lannister family, his father-in-law Tywin Lannister gave his support at the first time. He said that they could take on the task of shipbuilding in the west. As long as they had a strong fleet and the new wildfire that had achieved certain improvements, the advantage would still be mine. Robert agreed. There was no good way to disagree. Now the fleet of Dragonstone had firmly controlled the entrance to Blackwater Bay. If he hadn't arranged a large number of catapults on the top of King's Landing, those ships flying the three-headed dragon flag dared to sail on the Blackwater River blatantly. Your Majesty, the problem now is that we can no longer let the Dragonstone fleet be so arrogant. We must find a way to give them a hard blow and hurt them. A minister under his command advised. Well, my dear, you are right. Since the question you raised is very good, this question will be handed over to you. Robert waved his hand and fully demonstrated what it means to know people and appoint them well. Operator. Someone was in a daze. Go, call Varys over. Robert sat on the Iron Throne and ordered the Kingsguard. With the end of the Battle of the Tower of Joy, Robert finally appointed Sir Barristan Selmy as the captain of his Kingsguard at the suggestion of the Queen and Tywin. The remaining 6 are Jaime Lannister, Boros Bronn, Wyse Austen, Mandon Moore, Meryn Trant, and Preston Greenfield. But many people believe that this batch of White Knights is the worst ever. Only, fearless, Barristan is the most capable one. Yes, Your Majesty. A White Knight took the order and went. Robert's eyes were dim. Now there was no other way, he could only do this. He told himself, I am the messenger of the drowned god. Please ask the gods here to come to the seaside for a while. After a gust of evening wind, Jaehaerys heard a telepathic voice. Although it was far away, it was still clear. Look, it's all your fault, right? The voice of the treasure tree also sounded. It's nothing to know how to telepathically transmit. Today, Jaehaerys has already learned this skill, and he not only knows how to telepathically transmit, but also how to split his consciousness and send dreams. However, due to the split of consciousness, Jaehaerys' strength has temporarily declined, and of course the consciousness will recover on its own. Looking at the strength of the sound transmission, the person coming is unlikely to be a celestial or earthly immortal. At most, he is a human immortal who has suppressed his realm. Don't be afraid, just rush. Duobao Miaoshu urged. I didn't expect that you, a fairy root with thick eyebrows and big eyes, would also start to learn bad things. Jaehaerys said speechlessly. He had just recovered from the big ceremony, and then his consciousness was split and he caught a cold. His strength was definitely not comparable to his peak period. From what the owner of the sound transmission meant, he should not fight with me, right? If there is a fight, I won't go. I'm afraid of being embarrassed if I can't beat him, but I'm afraid that if I beat the younger one, the older one will come. I still have to go. He hung up the meteor sword, held the double-arc dragon bone bow, and carried the quiver on his back. What's more exaggerated is that he picked out a spear from the arsenal. Although they are all mortal weapons, after putting on the armor, a sense of iron and blood arises spontaneously. Let's go. Let's meet him. Jaehaerys looked at his appearance with satisfaction. Very impressive. When he arrived outside the castle, he refused the guard's follow and rode a horse straight to the location of the voice transmission. When he was almost at the shore, there were huge rocks everywhere and it was difficult for the horse to move, so he jumped off the horse and landed lightly with his feet. Rock leaping technique, he shouted in his heart. The whole person turned into a faint shadow, rotating, jumping, and rushing between the huge rocks on the shore. Rock leaping technique, which is also one of the 72 Taoist Isha techniques, is called rock leaping technique, but it is actually a light body lifting technique. It is said that as long as the cultivation level can keep up, one can step on the right foot with the left foot and spiral up to the sky. Of course, with Jaehaerys' current cultivation, the spiral ascension is definitely not possible, but once it is performed, the speed is faster than a galloping horse, and the figure is erratic, like a ghost. There is no problem at all to jump 2 to 3 meters high. As the cultivation level improves, Jaehaerys and Duo Bao Miaoshu are also arguing for a while. He can't use those green Dao fruits to fool people anymore. At the very least, he should use yellow Dao fruits. Otherwise, he will kick his ass. So Duo Bao Miaoshu judged the situation and finally agreed. Besides, it is not considered to be forcing the growth of seedlings to take out yellow Dao fruits or higher levels now. One person and one tree have long become a community of destiny, and they will prosper together and suffer together. However, Jaehaerys seems to have really fought with the earthly evil technique, and the ones he has recently opened are all one of the 72 techniques. He has already mastered the art of controlling the sword of the Yuenshin, but after splitting the consciousness, the art of controlling the sword cannot be used for the time being. Otherwise, he would not need to find any dragon eggs at all if he stepped on the sword with both feet and flew with the sword. After all, the dragons in this world are not only ugly, but also weak in strength. In addition to flying, breathing fire, and close combat, there are no other skills, which is a bit unbearable. Thinking of the several How to Train Your Dragon movies I watched before crossing, the dragons in them also have various skills, such as poisonous fog, invisibility, lightning, and feather launch. They are at least multi-purpose mounts. I can only say that when Mr. Martin wrote A Song of Ice and Fire, he still didn't open up his pattern. No wonder the dragons in this world are extinct and only dragon eggs are left. If they had a little bit of the majesty and domineering of my flower-growing family dragons, the ending would definitely not be like this. Although he has sent people to Essos to buy dragon eggs, it does not mean that there are no dragon eggs on the Westeros continent. There are still several possible places. One is Dragon Mountain, the second is under the ruins of Midsummer Hall, and the third is the bottom of the throat. Since Jaehaerys came to Dragonstone, he has been arranging people to search for dragon eggs in Dragon Mountain, but there has been no news so far. It has been more than 20 years since Summerhall burned down, and it is unknown whether it has been secretly dug up by the lords of the Stormlands. And at the bottom of the maw, there must be a dragon egg here. During the Dance of the Dragons, when Queen Rhaenyra's son, later Viserys II, was attacked by the fleet of the Kingdom of the Three Daughters, in the maw, the dragon egg he carried with him fell into the sea. However, looking for a dragon egg in the vast ocean is an unwise choice, let alone in this era, even on Blue Star. He also asked the inner guards to secretly investigate Summerhall. As for the sea, the sea is where I grew up. With the blessing of the rock leaping technique, Jaehaerys quickly arrived at the place where the message was transmitted. This is a small reef beach, far away from the pier and Murex farms, and there are few people here on weekdays. Under the moonlight, there is a figure on the reef, with long light green hair floating behind his head. As soon as Jaehaerys stepped onto the rocks on the shore, the figure suddenly turned around. I saw this man wearing a golden crown on his head, with long light green hair that was as dense as seaweed pressed down. There was a hair ring with a huge purple gemstone on his hair, which tightly bound the long hair behind his head, with a look like pointy ears like an elf. She has silver eyes, a high nose, and small silver scales on her cheeks. She wears a silver seaweed skirt, but the sleeves only cover her elbows and waist. If you want to say it's not covered, it's still exposed if you want to, or it's covered, and exposed a large area of fair skin. The waist is slender, revealing a small belly button, but it suddenly expands downwards into a huge fish tail. The scales on the fish's tail are colorful and glow like gems in the moonlight. Mermaid. This is a living mermaid. Jaehaerys shouted in his heart. Okay, don't act like you've never seen the world. Duo Bao Miaoshu felt that his landlord was really tacky. Mermaids, and mermaids actually all refer to a humanoid race that lives in the ocean. It is not surprising in the fairy world. The skills in Jaehaerys' first yellow Dao fruit are provided by the mermaid goddess in a small world of I am the mermaid king under the command of the drowned god. By the order of my god, I come to pay homage to the new gods here. The rich and generous mermaid said, her voice like the gentle waves of the sea, with an indescribable sense of charm. The strange thing is that this mermaid actually speaks the common language of Westeros. It seems that in the underwater world, you also need to learn a foreign language. Jaehaerys said that even education under the sea is like this. Oh, I am the son of the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, Jaehaerys Targaryen. If you are not looking for the wrong person, you should be looking for me. Jaehaerys touched his nose. There was nothing he could do, he was the only one on the island. I'm a practitioner, but I didn't say that I was the master of Dragonstone Island. PFF'd. I didn't expect that the newborn god that my god was talking about turned out to be such a child. The Mermaid King covered his mouth and smiled, revealing a mouth of teeth as fine as pearls. The most terrible thing is that when she talks and smiles, she bites her red lips lightly, which directly boosts her charm. If such a stunning beauty had spoken to him like this in his previous life, I'm afraid he would have blushed, timidly, and at the same time looked furtively. Now, he is looking at her openly, with eyes like X-rays. Scan the opponent's sensitive parts like a machine. How? Jaehaerys had been on the ship for a long time. The crew and soldiers often boasted that they had met a mermaid in a certain place, and then had a shocking interspecies love affair. Now that he saw living mermaids, he couldn't help but wonder how they did it. There is no hole in the tail. Could it be from the belly button? Next time if someone brags again, he will definitely call that person a mermaid knight or Enoki mushroom knight. What? The Mermaid King was startled, and then he saw Jaehaerys's eyes glancing at his big tail, and he suddenly felt embarrassed. She hasn't had a partner since she was born. Although it looks like that on the outside, it is actually not that at all. The blush spread all over her cheeks and neck. The fish's tail instantly sank into the sea water, giving Jaehaerys no chance to continue his scientific exploration. This is my god's gift to the newborn god. She wiped her hand from the hair ring behind her back, and a flash of red light flashed, and something appeared in Qianqiansu's hand. A mustard seed contains a substance. Jaehaerys's eyes lit up. This was the first time since he came to this world that he had seen this kind of storage magic weapon on someone other than the multi-treasure tree. The Mermaid King raised his hand and threw the object in his hand. Jaehaerys quickly reached out and hugged it. It was a round golden thing the size of a human head. It was slightly heavier than a stone, but it felt warm in his hand. Dragon egg. Where did the drowned god get this thing? 100 years ago, the throat. Oh, it turns out to be that dragon egg. Jaehaerys never thought that the dragon egg that was the least likely to appear would be the first one to get it. My god asked me to give a message to the new gods. The time for the battle between the gods has not yet come. I advise you not to overstep the rules. If you don't obey, all the gods will attack you. Jaehaerys was confused. What the hell is this? God war. Forget it, I'll just take the trouble to explain more. Following the Mermaid King's explanation, Jaehaerys roughly understood what was going on. This Song of Ice and Fire has two high-level gods, which is the so-called heavenly realm of the multi-treasure tree. There are several intermediate gods, which are in the realm of earthly immortals, and dozens of lower gods and attendant gods, corresponding to human immortals, ghost immortals, and foundation building stages respectively. However, to gods like higher gods, serving gods are like servants. Now that the age of silence has come, there is not much spiritual energy left in the world for the gods to squander. If there is a dispute between gods and they fight without scruples, landslides and sea destruction will occur with every move, which will speed up the waste and dissipation of spiritual energy. Therefore, since the Dawn era, the two superior gods have joined forces to seal the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It was even ordered that in order to create a harmonious, civilized, beautiful, and sustainable life for the gods must not attack each other. If a large amount of spiritual energy is caused to dissipate, then the gods in the world can unite to attack. But no matter how much you save in the Jingfa era, the spiritual energy will eventually dissipate one day, and then there will be the final battle between the gods. At that time, there will be grievances, and there will be revenge. At the same time, it is strictly forbidden for lower-level gods or above to directly interfere in human wars. You can find subordinates, spokespersons, and believers, but you are not allowed to directly take action on the human world. To put it bluntly, Jaehaerys's power is neither high nor low now. He is considered a low-level god with weak strength, so someone must remind him of the rules of this world. The most important thing is that you don't have to listen to the unwritten rules, but when people want to kill you, they must let you know why they kill you. Of course, that's not what the Mermaid King said, but that's what it meant. Promise her that delaying time will be good for you. Duo Bao Miaoshu's voice sounded. Okay, I am the most disciplined person. You respect me and I respect you. The Mermaid King remembered that Kai Guguo's previous look did not seem to respect him. But I still have a question. Doesn't the dragon destroy the balance between the gods? It's just a common thing, so why is it breaking the rules? Didn't you say that the dragon is a magical creature of blood and fire? It's just a failed work. Just like there are giant monsters under the sea and strange ghosts in the land of eternal winter. No wonder Drogo's dragon flames couldn't hurt the Night King in the TV series. The two's offense and defense are not equal, and the dragon flame can't break the defense at all. That puts me at ease. Jaehaerys nodded, then let me ask one more question. In a strict sense, is Samurai God a failure? If you don't open your mouth, I actually admire you quite a lot. Quote. The Mermaid King glanced at the boy with resentment. What's wrong with you, goddess of mercy? Don't you know what it means to see through something without telling it off? It is extremely difficult to advance to the divine level. She has been stuck at this level for decades. I heard that the god has unparalleled combat power, and even defeated 2 gods under the god of storms a few days ago. I wonder if you can give us some guidance. Where is the failed samurai god? Guidance is out of the question, but you are at sea and I am on land, how can we fight fiercely? Small problem. The Mermaid King smiled. His smile was alluring, and in a flash of light, the fish tail turned into 2 slender jade legs. No, just change it. Why are you still wearing a skirt? There is no basic trust between people. Bad review. This is just a little trick. Duo Bao Miaoshu said that my pair of discerning eyes had already broken through the fog and found the truth. Brother, can you teach me a lesson? Jaehaerys licked his face. It doesn't matter whether he has legs or not. I just want to learn. Are you eager to learn? I'm embarrassed to point you out. In the end, Jaehaerys still failed. It seems to God that he is good at using bows, arrows, spears, and swords. How about we compete with each other on these 3 things? First, how does this bow compare? Jaehaerys asked. The Mermaid King took out a carved fishbone bow and several fishbone arrows from the storage hair ring. She was quite tall, a head taller than Jaehaerys. She was estimated to be 170 centimeters tall. Her shoulders were thin. Perhaps due to racial talent, the lower body itself is slender. Even if the tail is transformed into legs, it will still be a Leg Wan Nian series. God, why don't you take a look at the cold grass on the boulder 100 meters away? The grass has 7 leaves. You and I each have 4 arrows. The one who hits the most leaves without damaging the stem wins. How about that? Jaehaerys raised his eyes and saw that there was indeed a small grass struggling to stick its head out from the crack in the rock, like the only stubborn sign in his extremely smart head. Okay, girl, please go first. You're showing off your ugliness. The Mermaid King filled up his fish bone bow and pulled out a bone arrow. Hearing a whoosh sound, the bone arrow went straight to the node between the leaves and stems of the grass. The leaves fell in response, and the stem was not damaged at all. Good archery, Jaehaerys praised. Such archery skills are far worse than mine. He drew out 4 arrows and fired them all in unison. All 4 arrows hit. Isn't this a trivial matter for him who has the ability to shoot arrows through lice? It is recorded in the book, Lizi Tangwen, that Ji Chong learned archery from Fei Wei. He hung a louse with a horse tail hair and looked at it every day. After 3 years, the louse was as big as a wheel in his eyes, so he took a bow and arrow to shoot it. The arrow penetrated the louse but the horse's tail hair was not broken. Ah, you're committing a foul, the Mermaid King said angrily. Who told you to come all at once? Can't you come one at a time? Jaehaerys spread out his hands. Is there such a rule? It seems there isn't. Is it okay for me to measure as much as I can? Just tell me whether I win or not and that's it. HMPH. You win this time. Let's compete in swordsmanship next. She muttered. Haha, whether it's swordsmanship or cheap skills, you're still young. Jaehaerys retorted scornfully. Since Jaehaerys acquired the sword skills of the Monkey King, he has been diligent in studying, never daring to slack off, and being able to calm down and lay a solid foundation. Every day, actual combat training involves more than 3 guards and knights who are skilled in swordsmanship, and sometimes the number is higher. Many. That scene was really one person beating a group of people. The swordsmanship has already reached the state of perfection. The Mermaid King took out another fish-bone sword. I don't know if it was because iron cannot be smelted in the underwater world, and most of its weapons are made of bones of various fish. This one looks like the mouth of a sawfish on Blue Star, with a rough shape and a blade full of sharp teeth. Jaehaerys pulled out the meteor, feeling a bit bullying. What if he broke the little girl's sword later and made him cry? But once the swords hit each other, Jaehaerys no longer had to worry. This bone sword seemed fragile, but it was actually a treasure. It is as hard as steel, and the Mermaid King's sword skills are also weird. He is proficient in hooking, blocking, stabbing, chopping, gallows and sweeping. Of course, the biggest reason is the sword, which is densely covered with sharp teeth. As long as the sword blades touch each other, she will instantly change her moves into hooks and chokes. If it weren't for Jaehaerys' strong determination and solid foundation, he would have given up his weapons without any hesitation. The two fought for more than 10 rounds, and both felt that the opponent's swordsmanship was difficult. Jaehaerys has a solid foundation in swordsmanship, unified footwork, and is good at close combat, while the Mermaid King has fantastic swordsmanship, and is also tall and long-handed. Although he is not good at small movements, he can move with his 2 long legs. Often the distance can be quickly distanced. He chased her and retreated, he retreated and she chased. The two were evenly matched for a while, and they couldn't tell the difference for a short time. Stop. How about a draw in this round? Jaehaerys suggested after deflecting a blow. In fact, this was more or less an advantage for him. After all, mermaids are elves in the sea, and their strength on land has naturally declined. 10 more in many rounds, he was sure to defeat his opponent, but what's the use of failing to win? Okay, the Mermaid King thought for a moment and then agreed. Although this boy looked small, his swordsmanship was indeed extraordinary. She thought to herself that at his age, he was definitely no match for him. Forget it if you have a long weapon. This is a horse weapon, so I can't use it in foot combat. Jaehaerys said, holding a spear in his hand. The spear gun is 12 feet long, which translates to 3.66 meters. There is no problem with the length, but the quality of the pole is not as good as the large infantry gun of the Blue Star flower planter. Haha, you're not good at spears, are you? The Mermaid King said with a charming smile. A flash of light flashed in her hand. While retracting the bone sword, she took out a gilded spear. The shape is exaggerated and the decoration is extremely gorgeous. The handle is decorated with images of palaces, mermaids, sea fish, etc., and pearls are dotted in between. The whole spear is more like a decoration than a weapon. No, Jaehaerys was annoyed when he heard it. I'm not laughing at you, don't make trouble with me. I won't tell you that my overlord's spearmanship is also inherited from overlord. There have been countless masters of spearmanship for thousands of years from ancient times to the present, but overlord is the only one, no semicolon. After Overlord fought at Gaexia and committed suicide by slashing his throat at Wujong River, he has been worshipped by later generations for thousands of years. He has long been a god, and his spearmanship has been included in the Duobao Miaoshu. Don't you think it's strong? I'm just afraid that this mortal soldier can't withstand Overlord's unparalleled courage. Jaehaerys held the spear well, holding the tail of the spear with one hand, which is called, the spear does not show the tail. He used the strength of his waist and abdomen to drive his upper arm and shook the spear. The whole shaft was like a giant python reviving, and then it made a series of creaking and twisting sounds. Cracks appeared on the spear shaft. Obviously, this pole is really fragile. However, laymen watch the excitement, while experts see the doorway. The Mermaid King knew at a glance that he was probably inferior to the opponent in spear skills. But who told him to lose a game? If he didn't win back a game, wouldn't he lose the face of the underwater world? Wouldn't it also bring shame to the ancestor god? Of course, as a servant of the god, she would not take advantage of the weapon, so she took out another spear from the storage hair ring. The shape was the same as the spear she held, but the appearance was much more plain. After she threw the spear to Jaehaerys, she pointed the spear at Jaehaerys. This battle must be fought. However, the gap between the two in spearmanship is even greater than that in swordmanship. Even though the Mermaid King is not weak, he is far behind the strength of Jaehaerys' overlord spear. Less than 10 rounds of fighting, Jaehaerys took advantage of the collision of the two spears and suddenly exerted his strength, knocking her gorgeous spear away. At this time, her arms were sore and her thighs were weak, and her spells were also lost. She returned to a slender fish tail. She was unstable for a while and fell on the rocks on the shore. Hey, be careful. Jaehaerys supported her with the spear under her armpits and helped her up. But he got a lot of eye rolls. The Mermaid King was upset. Seeing that your spear was not of good quality, I took the initiative to give it to you, but I fell down. I heard from the old people in the sea that you shouldn't rush up and hug me with your strong arms at this time. Why use the spear? What's the matter? Are you afraid that I will blackmail you? HMPH. Reckless. Goodbye, she said angrily, and after taking back the gorgeous spear, she did not ask for another one, turned around and jumped into the sea. Hey, what's your name? Jaehaerys shouted. After fighting for such a long time, I still don't know her name, which is really rude. Lillian Fisher. After a voice transmission, the waves on the sea covered the ripples and hit the rocks on the shore. Lost blood. I think it's consumed mana. Chapter 71. Hee. Brother, I noticed that you are quite smart. Why are you so tough at this moment? Duo Bao Miaoshu was full of sarcasm. It had never seen such a straight man. Nonsense. If she was really that kind of cute little lady, I would have hugged her right away, but she's not like that. Jaehaerys said confidently, what if she stabbed me while I was holding her up? How to fix it? What you said makes so much sense. Duo Bao Miaoshu was speechless. Forget it, this child is suffering from persecution delusion after Neux syndrome. Don't you have any other feelings for her? The shark race is a very popular race even in all the worlds. Jaehaerys thought for a moment and said, yes. Say it quickly. Her storage hair ring is pretty good. Yu Lao, you just need to pull a piece of steel next time. If you don't care about the red rope, it won't work. Duo Bao Miaoshu hates the fact that iron cannot become steel. You are just a Taoist priest who lives in fire and can have a family. Why are you so hard to think about it? Hey, do you feel that there is strong vitality in this dragon egg? Jaehaerys held the gem-like dragon egg. The surface of the dragon egg was covered with golden scales and white patterns. I always feel that it will next. It seems like he can break out of his shell in seconds. This spiritual pet is indeed about to be born. It should be that in the past 100 years, someone has been using divine power to maintain its vitality. Duo Bao Miaoshu thought that this kind of low-level spiritual pet would not actively absorb spiritual energy before it was born, or its parents had already sent enough spiritual energy into the egg when it was born, and it would be born naturally when the time was right. Or the day after tomorrow, through means, you can take the initiative to transfer the spiritual energy into it, thereby completing the final step of transformation. This egg was fished out of the sea. People often say that water and fire are incompatible. The moment this egg fell into the sea, it should have been taken away by the sea gods and nourished by divine power, otherwise the fire of life in it would have been cut off long ago. It can be said that it was indeed a great gift. Hurry up and transfer your spiritual energy into it, and warm it up. If possible, it's best to transfer the spiritual energy of a few Dao fruits into it in the next period of time. Duo Bao Miaoshu said. Why, don't you always think that the dragons in this world are weak? If they can obtain some skills, magical powers and the like from the Dao fruit before they are born, they might be able to advance. Duo Bao Miaoshu explained, this it is quite common in the fairy world. In addition to exotic beasts, many immortals also have various fairy birds as mounts. For rare birds such as cranes and phoenixes, the immortals will also use various rare materials to nourish the eggs of rare birds before they hatch. Well, this word is not wrong. After all, some fairy birds are just for serving. Okay, I hope that the hatched dragon will not only breathe fire but also lightning. It will be invulnerable and have wings that can travel thousands of miles. It is best to have 3 heads. No, 9 heads, 1 for each ability. Cut off one, the head instantly grew 3 heads. Operator. Oh, Operator. I asked you to transfer spiritual energy, but you made a wish for me. Duo Bao Miaoshu was speechless for a moment, and he still has 9 heads. Do you think it is the ancient ferocious beast Shongliu or the 9-headed bird? I don't even dare to think like this when I'm dreaming. Jaehaerys finally did as he was told. After all, it would be better to have one more skill. For this reason, he specifically asked Duo Bao Miaoshu to help pick out a Taoist fruit. It was best to be the kind of beast that becomes an immortal, otherwise it would not be professional. The Duo Bao Miaoshu thought about it for a while and realized that there are indeed non-human beings who become immortals, and there are quite a few of them. It can still tell the difference between the fruits it bears, so it quickly found one. It's useless to have too many, and it will be harmful to the spiritual pet. One is just right. Jaehaerys thought for a while and returned to the altar where the flying dragon tower was. He was already very familiar with the process of bathing, changing clothes, and washing hands. Hey, come on, I'm done buying it. Open. In fact, if you don't personally absorb the spiritual energy in the Tao fruit, you won't be able to perceive what it contains, so you can only wait for the dragon egg to hatch. When transferring the Tao fruit's spiritual energy, Jaehaerys also followed the command of Duo Bao Miaoshu to form a contract spell and penetrate it into the eggshell. The advantage of doing this is that it allows the spiritual pet to communicate with one's own mind. Although the spiritual consciousness can also do this, it is only a one-way call after all. After doing all this, they heard a rattling sound inside the eggshell, and the little dragon inside became restless. It seemed to be scratching inside with its claws, biting with its mouth, and pushing it with its horns. Finally, a crack appeared on the surface of the eggshell, followed by a pair of sharp dragon horns, followed closely by the dragon head. It's just born. Jaehaerys felt that the birth of this giant dragon was a bit too hasty. He looked up at the sky. In the original plot, when Daenerys's 3 dragons hatched, a bloody comet appeared in the sky. But now that my dragons have hatched, why is there nothing in the sky? Is the difference in treatment between districts so obvious? The newborn dragon is now about the same size as a kitten. Well, it's Princess Rhaenys' kitten named Balerion. It's just that when leaving King's Landing, Balerion ran around in the Red Keep and didn't have time to follow the ship. In the end, Jaehaerys didn't go to all the trouble to find it. It was already very uncomfortable with 2 children at that time. Easy. The little dragon is covered in red gold, the sharp horns on its head and the bone spurs on its back are milky white, there are irregular white stripes on its body, and the membranes of its wings are pale pink. If you ask me, you may have got the logical order wrong. The image of little Groot of Duo Bao Miaoshu emerged, and it lowered its head to tease the newly born dragon. Perhaps it is because the appearance of the red comet you mentioned just happened to lead to the birth of the dragon, not the other way around. Well, they are talking about the War of Gods, so does the bloodthirsty star mark the approach of the War of Gods, or is it that the 2 celestial beings have unlocked the seal of the spiritual energy? That's unknown, but in any case, you don't have much time, Hijia. Duo Bao Miaoshu rarely uses such a serious name, and the name Hijia has not been heard for too long, although it has been hidden deep in his heart and he dare not forget it. I am Hijia, and also Jaehaerys Targaryen, Jaehaerys said solemnly to Duo Bao Miaoshu. As if sensing the master's intentions, the little dragon raised its slender snake-like head and hissed at Duo Bao Miaoshu, and a faint firework came out of its mouth. Look at this little guy, his neck is so thin, his wing membrane is so fragile, his scales are so thin. Weaknesses. All weaknesses, Jaehaerys commented on the newly born dragon. His gritting teeth and tone were like a parent helping his child with homework. The dragon was frightened and shrank his neck, quickly folded his wings, and looked well behaved. Oh, be patient, even the 9 Heavens dragon grew up from a small loach. Duo Bao Miaoshu comforted. Wait, I remember when you signed the contract with me before, it seemed that you used Jaehaerys' name, right? Duo Bao Miaoshu suddenly reacted, I'm so sincere, and you're still trying to set me up in the contract. No, absolutely not, this contract must include the former name, otherwise I won't pay the rent. What? My son was accepted as a disciple by the dragon god, and he will have the opportunity to become a god in the future. Queen Layla looked at Jaehaerys in surprise. Indeed, the dragon god had already appeared in my dream last night, asking me to go to the depths of Dragon Mountain and practice with him. Jaehaerys was no longer a draft when he lied, and with the hatching of the giant dragon Hela. Gila was the name he gave to the little dragon, a golden little female dragon, and Jaehaerys covered his face. Hey, that, Jaehaerys riding a female dragon. He had already felt the deep malice from heaven. Whether it was a female dragon or a male dragon, the name had to be nice, and it must not be named something like a little white worm or a bloodworm. Let me ask, as the big sister of the new generation of dragons, who else can be called Gila except his little golden dragon? If you are not convinced, the little claws will instantly crush the little hammer, believe it or not. Although Queen Layla could not believe it for a while, even though she was very reluctant, she finally decided to let the child fly. This was also a helpless move for Jaehaerys. Now that his consciousness has quietly reached the lower limit of the lower gods, he dare not openly disobey the ban under the attention of the gods. Moreover, there are only 3 or 4 dragon god temples on the 3 islands of Blackwater Bay, but the incense is extremely strong. Once people taste the sweetness of having their wishes answered, they immediately become the most loyal supporters of the dragon god. At present, the speed of the splitting of consciousness can no longer catch up with the speed of the spiritual consciousness cultivation after the blessing of incense. When the water is full, it overflows. When things reach their extreme, they have a tendency to turn into a young god in advance. And there are more dragon god temples being built like mushrooms after rain. By then, the cultivation speed of the incense splitting will be faster. Jaehaerys does not want to be a partial god. If he obtains the godhood, he will coexist with this world. To be honest, it is also his fault. Who made him float his consciousness mixed with incense to Dragonstone Castle one night in order to test the art of dreaming? That night, many people had a dream. In the dream, the dragon god told them in a majestic tone that they were the most loyal believers of the dragon god. The dragon god decided to give them power. So the next morning, Queen Layla, who had no archery skills, stretched her muscles in the backyard, pulled a huge yew wood bow, and shot out long arrows, and the center of the target opposite was already filled with long arrows. Princess Rhaenys suddenly replaced the blunt sword she used for practice, picked up a long sword that was almost as tall as her, and practiced with her master William in the garden. And Viserys, how to say it, he took a long spear and poked at the sky wildly. When others asked him what he was doing, he said he was poking flies to practice spears. He also said that the most powerful spearmanship in the world is the Liuhe spear, but the first thing is to use a spear to poke flies. The fly falls to the ground without breaking the window paper, the wall without leaving a mark, and the spear pokes the incense head. The fire is extinguished but the incense is not broken. Even the cook in Dragonstone was swinging a kitchen knife like a sword, slashing at the meat and vegetables on the chopping board, and her movements were as smooth as a servant who had practiced swordsmanship for 10 years. A groom holding a spear actually beat a knight without any chance to fight back. And these people were still people who had no experience in using weapons the day before. Now the whole Dragonstone is really full of martial virtues. There are dozens of archers alone, and a large number of people who are proficient in swordsmanship and spearmanship, which is equivalent to adding hundreds of knights who have practiced hard for many years. As the dream spread, the incense of the Dragon Temple became more prosperous. Who doesn't have a heart that yearns for the strong? Who doesn't want to get fame and fortune on horseback? Jaehaerys thought that the incense road has now been put on the right track, and his real body can't interfere too much with the development of mortals. It seems that he has been traveling for more than a year, busy with worldly affairs. How can he have time to practice well? It's just the right time to take advantage of this opportunity. On the surface, I obey the prohibition of the gods, and secretly retreat to fight for the position of human immortal. He thought about the future development of the plot. Since the War of the Usurper, there has been a Greyjoy rebellion, which is also a lot of thunder and little rain. I heard that the Westerlands are constantly building ships, but he has heard that the docks are harassed by the Ironmen almost every once in a while. Think about it, how can others sleep beside the bed? As long as the Ironmen are not stupid, they will know that once a powerful fleet appears in the Westerlands, will they only attack Dragonstone. In the most recent operation, the Ironmen drove longships to plunder everywhere along the coast of the Westerlands. While all places were exhausted from defense, they raided the dry docks of shipbuilding, killing and plundering many craftsmen. Although the Westerlands soldiers, under the command of Duke Tywin, also killed and injured many Ironmen and destroyed several Ironmen's longships. But the lack of craftsmen made it impossible for the docks to start work again for a while, and Tywin said that even if the work was resumed, it was unknown when the Iron Men would invade again. The Iron Men are hooligans and villains on the sea. Cunning, but adhering to the principle that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, Jaehaerys suggested that the Queen write a letter to Balon Greyjoy, expressing her willingness to jointly deal with the threat of Robert and his allies at the cost of recognizing him as the King of the Iron Islands. In the end, the two sides verbally reached a consensus that Westeros can only have 3 fleets and the Sunset Sea Narrow Sea to help each other. The Iron Men are not good allies, and going back on their words is commonplace for them. But the temptation of being crowned king and restoring the ancient road is too great, and Balon Greyjoy finally entered the game smoothly. The most important thing is that Balon is not stupid. He knows that this is the best time to seek independence. If he gives up this opportunity, who knows when he will wait. So on the first day of 285 AC, Balon Greyjoy proclaimed himself king of the Iron Islands. He was crowned by Taller the Three, drowned under the ribs of the Naga, who placed a driftwood crown on his head. Then, Balon, who had secured his seat on the Seastone throne, destroyed all the 7 sacred septs, drove out all the monks, and announced that he would return to the ancient ways. Afterwards, the Iron Men plundered everywhere. The Iron Men's longships could be seen everywhere on the entire coast of the Westerlands, and their roaring Song of the Iron Men could be heard everywhere. The keel hull, passing over endless waves, desolate peaks, lush plains. I am a shield and a spear. The dead do not die, and will rise again, even more powerful. The rebellion of the Iron Men posed a great threat to the coastal lords of the Westerlands, the Riverlands, and the Reach. The entire kingdom was forced to shift its strategic focus from east to west and strengthen the defense of the Westerlands. This year was later called the Year of the Three Kings. The instigator of all this expressed no guilt for this. Anyway, the rebellion of the Iron Islands was a matter of time, and Jaehaerys just accelerated it. Just when Robert Baratheon was overwhelmed by the 2 fleets in the east and the west, and had no good solution. Jaehaerys detailed his future development plan for Dragonstone to Queen Layla, and the most important point was to develop the power of the Dragonstone royal family. Looking at the development of the Usurpers' War, it is still because the Targaryen family's own strength is not enough to fight 7 alone. Jaehaerys and Queen Rhaella talked for the first time about why the Targaryen family was expelled from the Iron Throne. Of course, King Aerys II's absurd behavior was the main reason, but the deeper reason was that the great lords had too much power, many vassals, and many soldiers and generals. The royal family had too little control over the small lords, so the execution of government orders relied more on the mediation of the great lords. The lord of the lord is not my lord. Most of the small lords would fight for the feudal lords, not the king on the Iron Throne. This situation has been around for a long time, since the rise of the Andal military nobles. Before King Aegon the Conqueror landed in Blackwater Bay, as a non-Andal alien race, he had to rely on lords of all sizes at the beginning of his army because his own power was too small. In addition to relying on the 3-headed dragon, he had to rely on lords of all sizes to finally complete the unification. But a long history never means advancement. Once some great lords have thoughts that they shouldn't have, the Iron Throne can only call on other great lords to suppress the rebellion together. For example, Duncan Targaryen, known as Prince Dragonfly, met and fell in love with Jane from Stonehenge after being engaged to the daughter of Lionel Baratheon, the Duke of Storm's End at the time. He gave up his right to inherit the throne and broke off the engagement, which led to the Duke of Lionel openly rebelling and claiming the throne. Finally, the then King Aegon V married his youngest daughter, Princess Lele Targaryen, to Lionel's eldest son, Duke Mond Baratheon, and this quelled the rebellion. This Princess Lele was later Robert Baratheon's grandmother. The great lords were too powerful and had seriously threatened the safety of the Iron Throne, and the Iron Throne did not dare to weaken their power without reason. This was very medieval. In Jaehaerys's view, relying on the so-called loyalty of the great lords did not play a big role in restraint, especially in this War of the Usurper. Aerys too asked Jon Arryn to hand over Robert and Eddard. Although there was a suspicion of exaggerating the charges, Arryn directly refused and raised the flag of rebellion. This is a bit unreasonable, right? And King Aerys did not kill the Tully family members, right? But they rebelled for a marriage contract. The Targaryen family is now hiding on Dragonstone. Although their strength is weak, it is also a good opportunity to restart the chess game. Without the constraints of the great lords, they can fully develop their own forces. In the conversation, he said that in the future, the lords of Westeros should be mainly wooed, but at the same time, more support should be given to civilian forces. In previous wars, weren't there many civilian orphans who died for the Targaryen family? Aren't there still thousands of the most loyal people on Dragonstone? Dragonstone can completely regard them as the team of civilian forces and send people to train and cultivate them. Don't talk about bloodline and other things. They are all 2 shoulders carrying a head. Who really has a higher IQ than who? At present, among the 3 islands in Blackwater Bay, except for Dragonstone, which is slightly stronger, the other 2 have been greatly weakened. Moreover, with the continuous infiltration of Dragonstone's economy, they have long lost the mentality and capital to resist and can only let it go. Dragonstone has maintained troops for 1,000 days, not for defense, but will definitely expand externally in the future. Those who have made contributions can be awarded the title of Lord, but they will not be granted fiefdoms. They will be sent to manage. After the mindset is formed, this will be promoted. When they encounter resistance, the power of the royal family alone will be able to suppress all opposition voices. At that time, the king will be the master of a country, and he will be arbitrary and have all the power. Queen Layla was persuaded by Jaehaerys. She had never thought about this problem. Confined to the inertial thinking of this era, the latter's idea was simply treasonous and subversive. Next, Jaehaerys told Layla about the future military strategic layout. There is no way. There are too many things to worry about right now. Jaehaerys can't do everything in detail, so he can only put forward a general direction. How to do it specifically still needs to be decided by Layla and her ministers. Whether he is passive or active, he must let go. According to my son, the next goal is. That's right, it's Andaz. Andaz is located on the other side of the Narrow Sea. It is the homeland of the Andals. On the one hand, the Andals were defeated by the dragons of the Valyrians and had to move their entire clan to the continent of Westeros. Most of this place is hilly, but there are also plains of considerable size near the coast. The people of Pentos call it the Flat Land. It is rich in minerals and fertile land, suitable for farming and grazing. And the most important thing is that this place has been plundered by the Dothraki. The people of Pentos did not build castles or military fortresses here. Instead, they often bribed the Dothraki cavalry not to plunder this place. Such a chosen place has become a place for Dothraki to graze horses. It is really a waste of natural resources. Choosing Andaz as the first place to attack was also a helpless move. Looking at the entire Westeros continent, Dragonstone Island has a powerful fleet, but its infantry is extremely weak. Even though Jaehaerys has created a group of people with high martial arts skills through dreaming, he has not found any outstanding generals in terms of strategy and tactics. Whether it is the era of cold weapons or hot weapons, fighting a war is not based on impulsiveness. For this, he can only sort out the limited military theories he knows to see if he can pick out the seeds of natural generals. In addition to the factor of generals, the number of infantry is also seriously insufficient. The number of infantry that Dragonstone can arm is less than 3,000 at best. This number of people, thrown to the continent of Westeros, can't even compare with the inferior lord family. For the great lord families like Tywin and Tyrell, recruiting 20,000 to 30,000 soldiers is like playing, while the inferior families like Frey, Hightower, Florent, and Bolton can easily summon 1,000 to 2,000 knights and squires, and the infantry can also be armed with 5,000 to 6,000 people at any time. Of course, Dragonstone is not unable to hire mercenaries and free riders, but the latter's combat capability and fighting will are too far from the level he wants, and the latter is even more messed up in terms of discipline. After all, a group of people who fight for money will fight to the death on the battlefield. If the enemy offers a higher price, it is possible that they will turn against each other at the last minute. What Jaehaerys wants to build is a professional army that obeys orders, has strict discipline, and can win battles, not the kind of militia that is temporarily recruited from the land and given a spear. The Targaryen family now has a dragon, but Hela is too young to ride in a short time, and he must abide by the prohibitions of the gods. Before finding a solution, he cannot interfere in the war in the world. If you want to continuously expand the military strength of the Targaryen family, you can only look outside. You have to pick the softest persimmon, and Andaz is a soft and sweet persimmon. After handing over the inner guard to Queen Layla and making the final arrangements, Jaehaerys said goodbye to everyone one by one and headed deep into Dragon Mountain alone. He had already built a small stone house on the top of the mountain. Before leaving, he told everyone that if they were in trouble, they could go to the Dragon Temple for help, and never forget that their own homes were also protected by gods. Since he went into seclusion, the top of Dragon Mountain has been designated as a forbidden area. Residents of Dragonstone Island often see golden dragons soaring on the top of the mountain. From time to time, the sound of dragons and tigers roaring can be heard from the mountain. Occasionally, in the absence of winter clouds, there were thunderbolts and fire again. Everyone knows that this is Jaehaerys receiving the teachings of the gods. When he returns from his studies, he will surely return like a king. At the secluded beach at the foot of Longshan Mountain, many people have sworn that they have heard mermaids singing late in the evening, with graceful songs. Time flies. Dragonstone's economic industry is now on the right track. With the support of a large number of golden dragons, professional fishing and foreign trade are being carried out in an orderly manner, and the foreign trade economic system created by Jaehaerys is gradually gaining strength. Along with the trade of crimson purple, wool and silk fabrics, dragon crystal jewelry, and canned fish and meat, a large number of ships from the free trade city-state brought these expensive fabrics, ornaments and food back to Urso, Sri Lanka continent. The dragon god belief gradually became known to the free trade city. When the crew of the first free city ship lost in the storm knelt on the deck to pray to the underworld dragon god and returned safely, the dragon god returned safely. God planted a seed in the hearts of sailors, and pirates. They began to enshrine the dragon god's statues on the ship, with different sizes and materials. These statues were brought back from Dragon Mountain on Dragonstone Island. It was said that they were made by Prince Jaehaerys, a disciple of the dragon god. And the statue of the god is indeed somewhat magical, so even the most demanding and stern captain on the sea will not prohibit people from this kind of worship. Gradually, before boarding a ship, it became a custom in the narrow sea to offer a stick of incense to the dragon temple to pray for peace. Just like a wand is necessary to enter Hogwarts, offering incense has also become a spiritual bridge to communicate with the dragon god. I don't know when it started, but people spread the news that the higher and stronger the incense burned, the more sincerity the dragon god can feel, and the more his wishes will be fulfilled. So in front of the dragon temple, the incense burned higher and higher, and everyone seemed to be holding a big sword. But all the incense candles will not exceed 3 feet. After all, the monks' temple blessings of the dragon temple have said before, if you raise your head 3 feet, you will see the gods. More than 3 feet, what, you want to knock the dragon god over? Human beings' desire for creativity is really endless, and later they came up with a series of various flavors of incense. No matter how rich the fragrance is. Then the initial sandalwood evolved into agarwood, cypress, musk, ambergris, saffron and various spices for incense. As soon as you entered the dragon temple, you felt like you were entering the spice market and kitchen. It was so smoky all day that Jaehaerys, incense sense didn't even recognize that this was his home. The dragon god had to ask for a dream again. Only sandalwood, cypress and other grassy incense were needed to burn incense. Other spices were a waste of resources and wealth, and would not produce additional effects. As a result, people began to think of ways to shape the incense offerings. Incense coils, incense sticks, tower incense, etc. have been developed one after another. There are also some fanatical believers who will design their own special incense. Once burned, the green smoke will form their own coat of arms in the air. Forget it, the dragon god has no energy to care about why people spend all day trying to please him. For a long time to come, he did his best to fulfill the wishes of his believers. Everyone is equal before him, but believers must not make a wish at will, because they never know in what form it will be realized. There was once a wealthy businessman who was so fat that he couldn't walk. He promised to lose 10 stone, 63.5 kilograms, but he actually lost weight later, but it was because he had aphthous sores and sore throat. He couldn't eat any delicacies except liquid food, and he was starved to death. Thin. There was that beautiful lady who secretly came to beg for a child. After she got pregnant, her husband broke off the engagement not long after she came back to express her wishes. It is said that her husband had hurt his roots in the early years. Someone asked for money, but was hit by a carriage when he returned home, and got a windfall for no reason. Someone made a wish for an annual salary of 5 gold dragons, and it was later confirmed that he got it, but a year later he was fired by his employer because he was too lazy to work. The dragon god uses an efficient and straightforward method to make wishes to believers. He just wants to fulfill them. The spirit is spirit, but it is a little too spiritual. So much so that how and where it is realized does not fall within the scope of his work. Later, the believers summed up their experience and made a wish to him with clear logic and no loopholes to exploit. It is best to speak the common language of the continent or Valyrian without an accent, with clear pronunciation. The meaning should be expressed in detail and clearly, and do not let him guess. The wording should be as careful as when signing a business contract. Use honorifics at the beginning and thank you at the end. In the first few years of Jaehaerys' seclusion, Dragonstone and the Iron Islands cooperated with each other, focusing on helping each other, and indeed achieved good results. Blackwater Bay once became Dragonstone's private territory. But Robert also had smart people under his command. They built 2 chain winch towers on both sides of the Blackwater estuary. It was to gather the power of all the blacksmiths in the city to create a huge chain. If the Dragonstone Island fleet dares to break in, the chain will rise and the iron chain will cross the river. Then use wildfire to carry out indiscriminate attacks on the river, causing the invading ships to be unable to advance or retreat, and the entire army is bound to be annihilated. What a brilliant idea! After careful calculation, Robert thought the cost was within the acceptable range, so he gave the task to Esser Jaden, who came up with this idea. Since the money was in place, Robert gave an order and soon built tall towers on both sides of the Blackwater River. The tower on the north bank was under the cliffs of the Red Castle, and the south bank was well protected, which was as solid as a rock. Jaehaerys didn't know that his fleet had intentionally or unintentionally caused the Blackwater River capstan tower, which was supposed to be built during the War of the Five Kings, to be built more than 10 years ahead of schedule. However, the Dragonstone fleet also knew that the army was weak, the navy was wasteful, and it was always a taboo for military strategists to go deep into the enemy's territory alone. So since the construction of the capstan tower, they have never gone deep into Blackwater Bay. Even if it was tactically necessary, they mainly harassed the coast and never launched a large-scale offensive. It was called harassment, but it was actually a recruitment. When the people along the way saw the ship flying the 3-headed dragon flag, they really signed up enthusiastically, wanting to go to Dragonstone to live a good life. No one would notify the Coast Guard sent by Robert. In terms of shipbuilding, Caesar Weverwater built the monkey version of the clipper ship according to Jaehaerys' opinion, increasing the deck height and reducing the sail area and mast height. Although the speed did not meet expectations, it was still more than 1 time faster than the large sailing ships of the free trade city-states. This type of ship is called a Caesar ship. Now hundreds of such ships have been built. It used to take 3 days to travel between the narrow sea and free cities such as Bravos. Now with a favorable wind, 1 day is enough. Such an efficient and fast ship has certainly attracted the attention of the Dragonstone fleet. Under the order of Admiral Tretimon, the Targaryen royal fleet replaced the old ships with a large number of new Caesar ships as a rapid response fleet and tax collection ship. Within 3 years after Jaehaerys retreated, the dragon Gila had grown big enough to ride. It obeyed Jaehaerys' voice transmission arrangement, accepted Queen Layla to ride on it, and fought for it. There was no way, its master was too terrible, thinking back to when it was just born. One man in one tree pulled its wings and neck and commented on it, scaring Gila to think they were going to chop it up and stew it. Before Jaehaerys retreated, he ordered it through a contract spell not to leave the range of Dragonstone before it grew up. After all, before the little dragon grew into a giant dragon, it could be killed by a crossbow or an arrow if someone ambushed it. But the nature of dragons is to like flying in the sky. Although Jaehaerys said he disliked this and that, he actually loved it. He couldn't bear to put it in a cage. Gila also said that she was very good and obedient, and her master's mother was very kind to her. I don't know if it's because she has been in the sea, but Gila likes to eat fresh sea fish. Queen Layla ordered the fishing company to select the best sea fish and bake them for her to enjoy. Relying on a dragon, although the attack is slightly insufficient, the defense and counterattack become simple. So even if Robert re-established his royal fleet in Storm's End, he still didn't dare to confront the Dragonstone fleet head-on. There was no way. They fought several times in the first few years. Often when the two sides were fighting fiercely, Layla would ride a golden dragon and swoop down from the direction of the sun, and the golden flames would instantly engulf Robert's ships. Accurate strikes. Robert's fleet suffered heavy losses. There were several times when the Dragonstone fleet might pay the price of 3 to 4 warships, but Robert's fleet had to leave at least 10 to 20 ships, and the exchange ratio was seriously exceeded. Later, even the Lannister family, which was known for its wealth and generosity, was unwilling to pay for the Iron Throne's shipbuilding abuse behavior. In the end, Jon Arryn proposed to negotiate with Dragonstone to end the hostile actions of both sides and protect the hard-won peace on the continent. A few years ago, Arryn made Dorne declare allegiance to Robert without any soldiers, and calmed the war in Dorne with just his mouth, thus gaining the reputation of the lords of the entire Westeros continent. Everyone is also full of expectations for his actions this time. Dragonstone is no longer the desolate place it used to be. It has prosperous business, rich fishery resources, developed textile printing and dyeing industry, and the shipbuilding industry and jewelry processing industry are gradually becoming famous in the two continents. It can be said that there is gold everywhere. Although it is not officially recognized now, everyone knows that Dragonstone is becoming the 10th Valyrian free trade city-state. The lords of the Westeros continent all want to trade with Dragonstone. They look at the 3 islands of Blackwater Bay and the Crabclaw Peninsula with envy. After all, who can go against money? With the will of the people, Lord Arryn was able to go, but negotiations are always extremely difficult. Queen Rhaella insisted on severely punishing Jaime Lannister and Sir Gregor Clegane, at least to make them wear black clothes, and at the same time, usurper, Robert had to give up the throne. Of course, Arryn would not agree to these 2 points. Who doesn't know that in order to prevent his beloved son from wearing black clothes, Lord Tywin has lent millions of low-interest loans to the Iron Throne over the years? As for the mountain, Arryn went to Dorne last time, and even the Prince of Dorne didn't want his head, let alone Rhaella. I thought the trip to Dragonstone would end up with nothing, but unexpectedly, there was a ray of hope. After worshipping the dragon god one day, Queen Rhaella actually agreed to conduct business cooperation with the continental lords other than the Lannister family, and reached a certain degree of reconciliation with the Iron Throne, and the two sides could send envoys to each other. This is the dawn of peace. Jon Arryn was relieved. It seemed that he was not a righteous licker who dreamed of peace, but a two-way run with the same mind and strength. In fact, he was still overthinking. The reason why Layla agreed to carry out limited cooperation was purely because of Jaehaerys' suggestion. Although Jaehaerys sat in the mountains, the news was not closed at all. Every dragon temple was his ears and eyes. Dragonstone is not short of money or people now, but it lacks the environment and time for development. It is an expedient measure to exchange time for space and small tolerance for big plans. Besides, what can we do if we send envoys to each other? It is a good opportunity to go to King's Landing to stir up trouble. Queen Layla has already secretly ordered the leader of the Inner Guards, Long Yi, to select elite generals and go to Westeros to set up an intelligence network. Queen Layla still trusts Long Yi and his spies. Since Jaehaerys' retreat, they have thwarted assassinations and poisonings sent by various forces several times. Even the small birds of the octopus spider and the commercial spies of various forces are all under their close surveillance. Now the internal guard spies have spread all over the important cities of Westeros, including King's Landing, Lannister Port, Storm's End, Riverrun, Winterfell and Dorne. And King's Landing is the most important part of the intelligence network. The intelligence is so detailed that King Robert visited which brothel and slept with which seafood merchant today. The intelligence can often be placed on Queen Layla's desk the next day. However, the intelligence inside the Red Castle was intercepted for a while. After all, Varys was in his position to do his job, and the intelligence chief could not be treated as a decoration. But the octopus spider is not a person who cannot cooperate. For example, Prince Aegon of Dragonstone is a good breakthrough. So in the dark, the spies of both sides not only know each other's existence, but have also carried out business cooperation on a small scale. For example, a certain insignificant little person has been going in and out of the Prime Minister's tower in the name of Prime Minister Duke Arryn for a long time, making a lot of money, acquiring and opening several seafood markets. Another example is a certain high-ranking member of the Golden Robes, secretly accepting bribes and selling official positions behind the king's back. Another example, Queen Rhaella even knew that Robert had asked the Faceless Man for a good price for the Targaryen family members on Dragonstone. However, because the price was so outrageous that Robert doubted his life, he gave up. The child is Queen Rhaella's forbidden love. At present, the Targaryen family only has a few children left on Dragonstone, and one is still outside and his life or death is unknown. In anger, she once wanted to punish the wife and children of the usurper with the same means, but was finally persuaded by Long Yi. Now Dragonstone Castle is protected by the inner guards and water cannot enter. The unique identity and household registration system of Dragonstone Island makes it impossible for foreign merchants and workers to get close to Dragonstone Castle. Moreover, even the cooks and grooms of Dragonstone Castle are extraordinary martial artists. Even if the Faceless Man is proficient in assassination, it is wishful thinking to sneak in silently. After all, the inner guards are also outstanding in assassination. Those secrets that they think no one knows will become traceable under the attention and interpretation of those who are interested. And those who have not found any clues can only wait until the last moment, when the enemy shows his terrible fangs and claws, before they repent. In the 5th year of Jaehaerys' retreat, the Iron Fleet was lured into a trap by Stannis Baratheon on Fairy Island in the west. More than 100 Ironborn longships were destroyed, and the Iron Islands lost their control of the sea. Half a year later, Pike was captured, and Balon Greyjoy took off his driftwood crown and knelt down to swear allegiance to Robert Baratheon. His only surviving son was adopted by Lord Eddard as a son and hostage. In the 10th year of Jaehaerys' retreat, the Iron Islands were resolved. Because of the arrival of the long summer, after the people's livelihood had recuperated, Robert was ambitious to rekindle the war against Dragonstone. But at this time, the lords who had already benefited greatly from the transaction with Dragonstone opposed it. It's okay to fight the Ironmen. After all, the Ironmen are a nest of robbers, but it's not fair to fight the god of wealth. Sorry, I won't accompany you. In the end, only the Lannister family of the West and its vassal responded, but before the battle started, Queen Layla rode a dragon and wandered over King's Landing. Looking at the dragon Hela, whose wingspan covered the sky and was like the rebirth of the Black Death, the whole King's Landing immediately fell into panic. Moreover, the dragon and its dragon rider were particularly cunning, always out of the range of scorpion crossbows and bed crossbows. They didn't come down to Spitfire at all, but just soared in the sky. Are you afraid? A large number of Royal Fleet soldiers would rather be beheaded than board the ship. The deterrent power of a dragon is so terrifying. 296 AC, the southern plains of Andes. A group of rich and powerful Pentos merchants dressed in gorgeous clothes rarely gathered together. In a sedan chair with ivory and gold, the rich merchants stepped on the backs of slaves to get off the sedan. They were the rulers of this city. Even the nominal prince of Pentos was just a chess piece they controlled at will. My lords, I'm sure you have also received a request to purchase Dragonstone, right? One of the wealthy merchants with a big belly said. This land is rich, but we are completely unable to defend it. The gold given to the Khals every year is enough to offset the output. As he spoke, the governors began to whisper to each other. Pentos is rich but weak, which is not a contradiction. It can only be said that Pentos is too far away from heaven and too close to Braavos and Dothraki. Now there is another Dragonstone rising. Less than 20 warships and a defense force of 1,000 people. They are not allowed to hire mercenaries or sign contracts with free mercenaries. The peace agreement signed after many defeats in battles with the powerful army of Braavos directly disintegrated the resistance of this rich city-state. It still has huge walls and huge wealth, but these things cannot guarantee their safety in front of swords. Now Dragonstone wants to purchase land, then give it to them. A wealthy governor began to shout. After all, we can't afford to offend anyone. That's right. If it weren't for my family business here, I would have wanted to move to Dragonstone to settle down. They have the protection of dragons and dragon gods, and no enemy can get through. Quote. The leader was speechless. You are the only ones who can calculate. My wife and children have already spent a lot of money to obtain the permanent settlement rights of Dragonstone. Am I proud? He touched the statue of the dragon god hanging around his neck. Not to mention, since the dragon god blessed his ship to escape from the Lost, his business has been getting bigger and bigger. Now he has become an important governor of Pentos, and his wealth has increased exponentially. And all this only requires him to speak for the acquisition of Andis Pingdao for Dragonstone when necessary. This deal is of course done. I agree. I've had enough of those barbaric and greedy Dothraki. Another governor shouted, can you believe it? They come several times a year. Even if they are harvesting wheat, they don't come so often. I agree too. Second, raise your hands and feet to agree. Of course, there were also people who disagreed, but their number was small and their voices were quickly covered by the shouts of the majority. Very good. Then we warmly welcome the distinguished guest of Dragonstone, Prince Viserys, to make a grand appearance. Amidst the applause, Viserys Targaryen, who looked a bit like the dragon god statue, appeared on the stage. His reserved expression carried the pride of the royal family of Dragonstone. Dressed in a bright silver silk robe, his body was covered with dragon crystals, pearls and gold everywhere he could see. A long sword decorated with rubies and emeralds was hung diagonally on the sword belt around his waist. Governors, sent by my mother, Queen Rhaella, the legitimate king of the Seven Kingdoms. Viserys thanked everyone in a high-pitched and highly contagious tone, and said that Dragonstone bought the flatland not to threaten everyone's safety. Instead, it was to allow Pentos to permanently get rid of the harassment of the Bravos and Dothraki people. Dragonstone came with peace and wealth. One sentence made the point clear. I want this land from Dragonstone. If others want to attack you, we will fight for you. Is Dragonstone so righteous? The governors are not 3-year-old children. They just listen to this kind of words. Isn't the real reason to expand their strength? Who can't see it? For the people of Pentos, the flatland belongs to them legally, but in the face of absolute strength, what is the law? As landlords, they can't come here once a year, and they can't make much profit. They also have to pay tribute to the Dothraki Khalasar in due time. Of course, what they said was, I'm not afraid of you Dothraki, I just think it's not worth it for such a small matter. If you are not beaten up, you will never say such a cowardly thing in such a tough tone. If you have the guts, why don't you try it? I'm afraid you will die if you try. So, if Dragonstone wants it, give it to them. As for the conflict between Targaryen and Dothraki and Bravos, sorry, it has nothing to do with me, Pentos. Amidst the compliments, Viserys was a little intoxicated. Even though his twin brother had not appeared for many years, his legend was still circulating in the world. Viserys felt that he had been living under his shadow. Sometimes he even thought, if there had never been a person like Jaehaerys in the world, how great it would be. Ding-a-ling-ding, a crisp sound of horse bells came with the shaking of the earth. The faces of the governors of Pentos suddenly changed. It was bad. Something was wrong. Why did the Dothraki come so quickly? In the distance, dust filled the air. Countless Dothraki cavalrymen wearing painted leather vests emerged from the flying dust. They whistled, screamed, and shouted. The araks in their hands were like crescent moons. As the leading cavalry surrounded the crowd, the rear cavalry followed, and the number of people was so large that it was impossible to see the end at a glance. In front of a group of Slark riders, a tall man with long braid and hanging legs rode on a tall red horse. It's called Drogo. It is said that this man has never been defeated in his life. His Khalasar is extremely powerful, with more than 40,000 mounted warriors. The governor who knew the visitor whispered. Ka asked, why did your lords gather in Lezu Andari Dothraki, the land of the Andals, when it was not time to pay tribute? A rider stepped out from behind Khal Drogo and said with a stiff and awkward voice. Lilian asked, and who is this milkman? We are the Seven Kingdoms. Viserys' squire answered on his master's behalf. Ka didn't ask you. The man drew out his long riding crop, rounded his arms and whipped it hard at the attendant. Stop. Viserys was shocked and angry. This made him slap him. Wouldn't it mean slapping himself in the face? Before he could think too much, he drew out his ornately decorated sword, and with a flash of sword light, he cut off the rider's whip. Only 3 feet of the exquisite riding crop made of cooked cowhide mixed with silk thread were left in the visitor's hand. The severed part jumped slightly on the ground twice before going completely dead. Aha! The Dothraki drew their knives in their hands one after another, and many riders had already bent their bows and drew arrows without firing them. Everyone on Dragonstone also drew their swords in their hands and raised their shields to protect Viserys. The people who came to escort this time were all Dragon Castle guards. They were all wearing black plate armor and chain mail, and they moved with steady steps, fast, drawing swords and raising shields in one go. They are obviously elite soldiers. Khal Drogo waved his hand and shouted in Dothraki. Upon seeing this, the riders behind him took back their scimitars and bows and arrows. Viserys secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If there was a fight, they would be at a huge disadvantage if they had so few people. It's a pity that he doesn't have a giant dragon himself, otherwise if a giant dragon is here, no matter how many knights come, they won't be able to keep him. We, Khal Drogo, say that your swordsmanship is good. If you can defeat him, all of you will survive today. If you fail, all of you will become his slaves, milkman. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Viserys's cheeks turned red with anger. How dare this man be so rude? Compare it to one another. With more than 10 years of sword skill, how can a mere barbarian leader block it? Everyone made a circle for the two of them. Viserys held the sword in his hand, but Drogo had empty hands. You ask him, doesn't he use weapons? Ka said that he can't use weapons to deal with a milkman like you. You should just wait and be sold to Slavers Bay, where you will be loved by all the ladies. How arrogant. You are seeking death. Viserys laughed angrily. This man really doesn't know how to die. He said no more, and Drogo beat his chest with his hands and yelled at his Khalasar. When Drogo was facing Viserys, the latter shook the sword in his hand, and the tip of the sword instantly lit up with little cold stars. It was the white snake spitting out the message in the ape man's sword technique, and the tip of the sword went straight to Drogo's throat and armpits, coming from the chest. This is a probing move that combines virtuality and reality. If the enemy cannot tell the difference between reality and is in a hurry, he can immediately turn the reality into reality and kill the enemy with horizontal slashes or thrusts. Drogo dared to face the enemy with bare hands. It was obvious that he had extremely rich eyesight and experience. He turned sideways or retreated, easily dodging several swords of Viserys, and then shook his finger provocatively at the latter. Viserys's eyes narrowed. Although this man was tall, he was not stupid, and he was not wearing armor, which allowed him to move much faster than the knights who usually sparred. No, His Highness Prince Viserys is no match for Khal Drogo. Sir Leeds, the leader of the guards, said. He is an old man from the Red Castle who has seen people with extraordinary martial arts skills such as the Dawn Sword and the White Ox. Very powerful. Although Viserys's swordsmanship is extraordinary today, it is not integrated and coherent. His movements are too slow and there are too many flaws. In the past, sparring with knights in full armor took advantage of the slow movement of the knights. But the man in front of him moved as fast as a cheetah. No matter how sophisticated Viserys' moves were, what was the use if he couldn't keep up with his speed? He whispered and ordered that once Prince Viserys was defeated, their group of guards would have to hold off the Dothraki cavalry even if they died, so that His Highness the Prince could escape. Sir Leeds really couldn't imagine that if the Prince of Dragonstone was treated as a slave and sold to Slavers Bay, it would have an impact on the reputation of Dragonstone. It would be no different from a volcano erupting or an earth dragon turning over. Even if he risks his own life and others, he will never let this happen. After more than 10 minutes, everyone could see that Drogo was teasing Viserys like a cat and a mouse. During the battle, Viserys' physical strength gradually depleted, and his sword moves gradually slowed down. His opponent was as slippery as an eel in the sea, and his occasional killing moves were blocked by him using the golden armbands on his arms and legs. Block easily. The strong force coming from the sword almost made him unable to control the sword. With inferior strength, inferior speed, and inferior martial arts, Viserys seemed to be defeated, but he claimed to be a true dragon, so how could he admit defeat so easily? After a few moves, his strength was a little weak, and he almost had his sword taken away for a moment. Roar! Drogo saw Viserys' weakness. He had had enough of playing tricks and shouted. After avoiding the latter's diagonal slash, his big hands were like iron claws and grabbed Viserys' neck. Unexpectedly, Viserys' mouth corners slightly raised, and he was not panicked at all. After the slash, he took the sword and hid it behind his back, handed the sword to his left hand, and slapped Drogo's attacking hand with his right hand, while his left hand held the sword and lifted it up. It was an extremely insidious and hidden killing move in the Ape King's swordsmanship, the back sword posture. Everyone exclaimed. This slanting upwards hit Drogo's right eyebrow arch, and blood instantly flowed out, dyeing half of his face red. However, the left hand was weak after all, and the long sword was blocked by the eyebrow arch bone, and it failed to cut the eyeball. And Drogo seemed not to feel the pain, and his right hand was still grabbing Viserys' throat. It was like a posture of exchanging injury for death. Viserys felt as if his neck was put on the gallows. He was going to cut with his left hand holding the sword, but unexpectedly, halfway through, he was pinched by another big hand. Drogo's face was ferocious. He didn't want to be pecked in the eye by a goose after hunting geese all day. It was really shameful. He no longer planned to keep this milkman to sell, and the shame he brought upon himself could only be repaid with blood. He knocked off his long sword with his left hand, just like when he broke the claws of the Helica Dothraki, white lion with his bare hands on the great grass sea. He gradually exerted force with his right hand and raised it high. A blood-red color appeared in front of his right eye, and waves of stabbing pain came from his brow bone, which stimulated him to go crazy. Viserys's face turned terribly black, and he struggled hard, grabbing the opponent's hand with his hands, kicking with his feet, and pushing with his knees, but the opposite side seemed to be the heavy wall of Dragonstone Island, which he could not kick open with his feet or push with his knees. And he was like a chicken being strangled by the cook, fluttering but unable to do anything. The guards tried desperately to rush over to rescue, but were blocked by the opponent's warriors. For a while, the clanging sound of knives and swords colliding, the sound of sharp weapons piercing into the human body, and the sound of shields holding swords and swords were endless. At this moment, a huge black shadow covered the sky. Everyone looked up and saw a sharp arrow falling from the sky, heading straight for Drogo's head. Great! Her Majesty the Queen is here. The huge wing membranes fanned up a strong wind, making it impossible for the people below to open their eyes. The majesty of the dragons made the horses under their crotches roar and retreat. Even the best and most excellent war horses would tremble and lose control of their bowels and bladders after seeing the dragon. This is the insurmountable nature of creatures that has been passed down in their blood since ancient times. It is an instinctive reaction. Wherever the shadow of the dragon went, the knights tried their best to control the horses under their seats, but countless people were still thrown off the backs of tamed horses. Those whose legs were broken and those who fell saw the shadow descending rapidly, and they rolled and crawled away from the place covered by the shadow, and a huge open space was formed in an instant. Accompanied by huge smoke and dust, the dragon slowly landed. When the dust settled, the Dothraki who fled to the distance finally reined in their horses and looked at the huge creature that was even bigger than the two huge bronze horses of Vaes Dothraki in horror. Its body was covered with glittering golden scales, which were as bright as pure gold, but larger than a human head, densely packed without gaps, and dotted with white patterns, like beautiful jade inlaid on gold. On its towering and majestic head, a circle of white and gold bone spurs was like a crown, and its head was narrow and long, and its golden eyes were like a pot of molten gold. On its back, there was a slender armored knight, also wearing golden scales, with a white lining under the scales, a half-handed sword hanging on his waist, a huge double arc bow in his hand, and a quiver hanging on the bone spurs beside him. He wore a dragon helmet, with the visor lifted up, revealing a thin but resolute face, which was very similar to Viserys. Only his eyes were emotionless, and when his eyes swept over them, everyone seemed to be cut by a sword. His Highness Jaehaerys, Sir Leeds screamed. Although he had not seen Viserys for 10 years, his almost identical appearance and dragon reminded him of his once shining Targaryen twin brother. The battle below had already stopped, and Khal Drogo dodged the arrow as soon as it hit him, but he was still a step too slow. The arrow pierced his right arm, and in pain, he couldn't help but let go of Viserys' neck. The latter fell to his knees, coughing and gasping violently, with a lot of saliva flowing from the corners of his mouth. Viserys, my dear brother, why did I always see you in such a mess? Jaehaerys slid down Hela's pale pink wing membrane. His boots were inlaid with tiny dragon scales. This was the dragon scales that their mother sent people to collect every year. After making underwear, linings and other clothes, they arranged for people to send them to Dragon Mountain. This is the case every year. But Viserys didn't have this treatment. Golden dragon scale greaves, knee pads, skirt armor, crotch guard, chest back armor, shoulder armor, throat guard. Viserys looked up at his twin brother with envy, a guy who had disappeared for 10 years, a nasty guy. At the critical moment, he pretended again. Viserys didn't understand why he was so unlucky, having never fought a battle, and finally being rescued by his nasty brother. If he could choose, forget it, let him save him, after all, he only had one life. His face flushed, and he glanced at the barbarian leader who was crossing his arms and looking alert. It was this man who almost took his life just now. In anger and extreme shame, a force suddenly rose in his body, and he picked up the sword on the ground and stabbed the other party in the heart. Despicable, shameless, despicable. Drogo's 3 blood guards were shocked and angry, and drew their swords in their hands, but it was too late. It seemed that Khal Drogo was about to die on the spot. Dang! 2 swords collided in the air, and a slender black sword blocked Viserys's long sword, with silver threads dotted on the blade, like meteors in the night sky. Taking advantage of someone's misfortune is not what a prince should do. Jaehaerys stopped Viserys from stabbing Drogo with his fatal sword. He swung his rapier lightly and swung the long sword away. Someone bullied you. Wait until you have practiced your skills and then bully back. But he almost killed me. Viserys pointed his long sword at Drogo and said, "That's because you are not good enough. I haven't seen you for 10 years. Even if you have been taught by the dragon god, you are still like this." Jaehaerys shook his head. His steps were floating and weak, his movements were slow, and there were many flaws. After Viserys got his dream, he obviously didn't practice the basic skills well. He was able to practice with the knights at ordinary times, all thanks to his exquisite swordsmanship and the other party's fear of killing him. If he really went to the battlefield, he would definitely die in the hands of others within 10 rounds. Someone should have made him understand this truth long ago, so that he would not think too highly of himself. My brother. Jaehaerys paused. He used to call Viserys or brother directly, but now he has not spoken for 10 years, and it is very awkward to call him. What hatred or grudge do I have to kill him in a duel with you? He stared at Drogo with cold eyes, and his purple eyes were more oppressive than the molten gold eyes of a dragon. This look reminded Drogo of the white lion he met in the Great Grass Sea when he was young. No, the white lion's eyes were cruel and vicious, but the man in front of him. He looked at himself as if he was looking at a blade of grass, a tree, or a stone, cold and ruthless, as if everything in the world was grass and trees in his eyes. Percent at percent, U0026, Drogo shouted in Dothraki, and then seeing the man opposite him with a suspicious look on his face, he quickly turned around and yelled to the back, and soon the translator came over tremblingly. He repeated his words again. The call said that he didn't know that the milkman was your brother, and he was willing to give 100 good horses as compensation. Who said that the Dothraki people don't know how to give in and never make deals with others? Isn't this easy to talk to? Jaehaerys was very satisfied. He told the translator that people of the Targaryen family didn't have the reason to not fight back after being beaten. Drogo was injured and it was inconvenient for him to fight. He could let any of his warriors take his place. As long as they could take a move from him, then today's grudges would be written off. The translator conveyed his words to Khal Drogo, who looked suspicious. This man was very difficult to deal with, and he kept thinking in his heart. Blood of my blood, let me do it. 3 blood guards rushed to offer their services. Apart from Khal Drogo, they had the most combat experience. Kahalo, blood of my blood, you go, be careful. Drogo shouted in Dothraki. A short, fat, bald man wearing a Dothraki painted leather vest came out. He was not young, but he did not look old when he walked. Kahalo watched Jaehaerys, every move carefully, with an unusually alert look. Jaehaerys smiled slightly, and walked leisurely, making people feel like walking in the flowers in the godswood. The black sword flashed by, and then the sword was sheathed. Swish. Since you are old, I will spare your life today. A line of blood fell from Kahalo's forehead, and he looked down at the arak in his hand in disbelief. At some point, it broke into 2 pieces. The slender blade didn't even pause, instantly cutting off the scimitar and stabbing Kahalo. Everyone was simply dazzled, and didn't even know how he did it. This man was so terrifying. When Jaehaerys, eyes swept over the surrounding Dothraki knights, everyone involuntarily took a step back. The power of one man and one sword actually scared away thousands of cavalrymen. Jaehaerys felt bored. Hey, I am invincible in the world. Drogo was convinced when he saw Kahalo defeated by a sword. This man was much stronger than himself. The Dothraki worship the strong. Jaehaerys defeated Kahalo easily and won the respect of all Dothraki. Drogo immediately said that his Khalasar would not harass the Andal land from now on. At the same time, the failure of the Blood Guard was his failure. He picked up Kahalo's broken blade, cut off his braid that was as long as his knees, and handed it over with both hands. Jaehaerys nodded. This Drogo could take it and put it down. He was a character. It was a pity that he died in the original book, but he should have no entanglement with the Dragon Queen in this life, which was also a gain in the Mulberry. The Dothraki came and went in a hurry. They waved their whips, leaving only a pile of horse manure to moisten the soil for the next year. The governors were in a roller coaster mood. It was so exciting. Originally they thought they were going to be wiped out, but unexpectedly, Dragonstone rescued them from danger. Otherwise, even if they sold the entire plain, the gold they got might not be enough to pay the ransom. Who is Governor Illyrio Mopatis? Jaehaerys asked with a pleasant face. The governors all cast their eyes on a fat man who dyed his beard yellow and braided it into a forked pigtail, thinking that this kid might have stepped on dog shit when he went out. Reporting to your highness, I am Illyrio Mopatis. I wonder what your highness wants me to do. The man came with a slight Bravos accent, looking fat, but walking lightly unexpectedly. You should know why I'm looking for you. Jaehaerys smiled. This man and Varys were in the same boat. For the current Targaryen family, it is unclear whether they are enemies or friends. There has been no news of the real Aegon so far, and his life or death is unknown. Your highness, please tell me. Illyrio asked doubtfully. Dragon eggs. You bought 3 dragon eggs from the Sea King of Bravos 10 years ago. Don't tell me that the merchant they are talking about who used to be a mercenary in Bravos and later married the sister of the Prince of Pentos is not you. Oh, so your highness is asking about this. Illyrio pretended to be relieved. I thought I was exposed. The price is negotiable. Although Dragonstone is not rich, 3 dragon eggs can still be afforded. Jaehaerys' tone was full of confidence. During these years of retreat, he has been paying attention to the changes in the situation every moment through the consciousness of the incense clone. He even knew the details of Balon Greyjoy's rebellion clearly. After all, Lillian Fisher often shared intelligence with him in the first few years of his retreat. Speaking of which, I haven't talked to that mermaid for a long time. One day, the other party suddenly sent a message saying that she also wanted to retreat and practice. I don't know if she will come out. After 9 years of seclusion, Jaehaerys has successfully condensed the 3 flowers on his head, returned to the origin of the 5 chi in his chest, refined the yin dregs in his spirit, and achieved the yang god. At this moment, he has reached the position of human immortal. But in order to survive the 3 disasters and 5 calamities and achieve the status of earthly immortal, he had to spend more than a year to transfer all his magic power and divinity to the incense clone by means of transplanting flowers and trees. It took another year to leave a little enlightenment in the spirit and the flesh again. After years of spiritual energy infiltration, even if the flesh has no spiritual energy at this moment, the strength, reaction speed, and muscle strength have reached the peak of mortals. Because there is no divinity, for the gods, he is now the spokesperson of the dragon god, or a flesh puppet. Even if he walks in the world, he uses no more than the physical strength of a mortal, and does not use a trace of spiritual energy. Of course, it is not considered a violation of the gods' ban. Your highness, I spent those dragon eggs. Illyrio was eloquent, just not wanting to give them up so easily. Noisy. The pure flesh warrior Jaehaerys no longer had the self-restraint and courtesy he had practiced, and only wanted to suppress all the voices of disobedience with powerful force. He pulled out a meteor and directly cut off a braid of Illyrio's beard. I'm not negotiating with you, understand? Either hand over the dragon egg or die. Illyrio felt the wind blowing cold on his chin, and cursed in his heart, the beard he had been taking good care of. Just gone like that. There was no time to feel distressed, because he clearly saw the cold light flashing in Jaehaerys' eyes. Don't worry, your highness, I am willing to give them to you. You are sensible, I don't care what your relationship with Varys is, and I don't want to care about your conspiracies and tricks. I warn you, don't mess with me and the Targaryen family of Dragonstone. Awakening the wrath of the sleeping dragon will only bring disaster to yourself. Your Highness. Illyrio was shocked. Many people knew about his friendship with Varys, but the so-called conspiracy and tricks were really unfair. At first, they just accepted orders and commissions, and had no intention of usurping power. Now that Dragonstone has a giant dragon, it is quite powerful. In addition, with the flat land in its pocket, it will become even stronger in a few years. It may not be impossible to surrender there at this time. However, this still needs to be discussed with Varys. After all, Varys has more experience in this matter. The dragon egg is in my house. Please come with me, Your Highness. Okay, I don't think you can make a big wave. Jaehaerys nodded. Your Highness, you still have to think twice. Now that our army has not landed, if they have any thoughts that they shouldn't have. Quote. The leader of the inner guard, Sir Leeds, whispered to advise. Even though His Highness is extraordinary in martial arts, it is easy to dodge an open knife and difficult to guard against an arrow from the dark. As an inner guard, although he is not proficient in assassination, he has seen many inner guard colleagues find out many assassins sent by the Iron Throne. Some assassination methods made him feel incredible. No defense. Jaehaerys waved his hand. He really didn't have any spiritual power, but he was a human immortal after all, so he was immune to all poisons. Besides, he walked in the world with a mortal body, so how could he not have any defense? Melisandre, the red-robed woman, also had a magic gem. She was just a mortal body, but she was still immune to the strangler of old Maester Crescent. And on Jaehaerys' neck, under the lining, there was also a statue of the dragon god with exquisite carvings. Illyrio's house was magnificent, with white marble paving the floor, carved beams and painted buildings on both sides of the corridor, and painted with gold. In the huge reception room, the scene of the fall of Valyria was depicted with colored mosaic glass, and the lamp oil in the black lanterns on the four walls was burning continuously. Your Highness, please take a rest. I will have someone bring the dragon eggs. Illyrio turned around and gave a few instructions to the slaves, who immediately turned to the house behind. A moment later, 4 sturdy slaves came carrying a bronze-decorated cedar box. After Jaehaerys opened it, he saw 3 huge dragon eggs, which lay quietly on velvet and brocade. One was dark green, with bronze spots revealed as his palm turned, another was light milky white with golden stripes, the last one was black with dark red waves and whirlpools. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. Jaehaerys silently recited their names in his heart. You will have new names and new stories in this life. Are you ready to ride on the blue sky and white clouds with me? As if sensing Jaehaerys' call, the dragon eggs became more vigorous. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.